This film is purely fictional. Please do not imitate it. Your like and subscribe are the motivation for me to update. Chapter 873 Split. On the other side, after a fight, it was the 9th level prophet Grey Mist who had the last laugh. After paying a certain price, he deceived the royal guardians with the help of his fake clone, and his main body disappeared with the crystal core. Although he got the core of Onyxio as a sub-body, Grey Mist's mood at this time was not so wonderful. He had discovered the means that Avis left behind before he disappeared. It was very simple. He just made a plan for the fate of this crystal core, making it entangled with his own fate. In the future, it would return to Avis's hands due to various accidents. If the development was as expected by Grey Mist, he should not care about these. After all, as long as he could leave this world, this connection would naturally break. Even if he took a step back and failed to successfully escape, with his 9th level prophet strength, it would be possible to spend some time to erase it again. But the biggest problem now is that, due to the precautions, the joint attack of several royal guardians destroyed the Fate ritual array and interrupted his secretly maintained positioning of the Underworld Sea. Although he successfully obtained the core, the subsequent backlash of the Web of Fate also made Grey Mist miserable. As a prophet, the price he paid for actively calculating the Son of Fate was quite huge. Because this behavior is tantamount to public officials knowingly breaking the law, which is directly aggravated. And the Son of Destiny like Landon, who is almost the protagonist of the era, used him to forcibly solve the sub-body of Onyxios, which is the price of Grey Mist's direct disconnection from the Web of Fate, almost in a state of title. Although he is still a 9th level extreme strongman, he has temporarily lost the power to control fate. This made Grey Mist, who was holding the crystal core, very embarrassed. He was now helpless against Avis's methods, and without the power to control fate to conceal his own existence, the longer this thing stayed in his hands, the more dangerous his situation would be. And with his current strength, he did not dare to use the crystal core to break through in this world. According to the top-secret information he had obtained, all the existences that broke through the legend in this world would be sucked into the interlayer of reality and dreams at the moment of breakthrough, and accompany those ancient dark existences. After thinking it over, the only way to break the situation is to restore the coordinates of the Underworld Sea as quickly as possible before the enemy comes to the door, and then find a way to create a weak point in the Zenith Wall again, and then escape by force. In the following time, the situation in the Gloria Empire gradually began to deteriorate. The Emperor, Duke, and even Marquis who represented the supreme power all disappeared, which had a catastrophic impact on this huge empire. The piles of government affairs were ignored, and even if there were consuls to handle them, there were many major matters that could not be decided. After discovering the current strange situation, the small and medium-sized nobles in various places began to show restless behavior. Although the princes and princesses wanted to gain power, the entire empire was too vast, so they could only expand their power as much as possible while keeping their own territory. Coupled with the resistance organizations that were igniting everywhere, the entire empire felt like it was in full bloom. Many areas that were originally peaceful were now shrouded in war, and the people were living in misery. The royal guardians who were supposed to suppress the situation were indifferent to the chaos in the empire at this moment, but all of them went out, using various imperial resources including the Eye of Destiny to frantically search for the whereabouts of the Grey Fog. They knew very well that Grey Mist would never dare to use the crystal core directly in the world, and it was impossible to cover up the incident that could penetrate the ceiling wall, so as long as they could find Grey Mist, they would definitely be able to take back the crystal core. As for the various chaos in the Empire, in the eyes of the high-ranking Ninth Order beings, compared with the approaching Dark Doomsday, they could be completely ignored. Under such a background, the 4 major family alliances under Anbis also lost their previous constraints and began to flourish again. However, the contradictions within the alliance were finally exposed at this moment. The faction led by Phoenix Enoch officially announced its split from the 4 Great Family Alliance and became an independent force, the Avengers Alliance. Pale Lord Phoenix led his Winter Legion to recapture the territory that was previously lost due to the siege of a group of small and medium-sized nobles. With the continuous sacrifice to Pale Frost Lord Atalphos to strengthen him, his current strength is already the best person below the 9th level. Relying on the frost power from Atalphos, he was even able to barely fight 2 moves with the 9th level and retreat unscathed. With such strength, the former 8th level rebel leaders and small and medium-sized nobles were no longer his opponents. The territory actually controlled by the Avengers was getting bigger and bigger, and even began to rival a group of princes and princesses. Fiona's performance was also outstanding. The war in the province of Carlas had been quelled by her army, and her own reputation was gradually established in the successive battles. The star of hope in the north, the crown feather of the cold wind crystal bird, the star diamond of Olivindi. The former fame and praise are now restored to her. Unlike the fame that originally came from the prestige of the Olivindi family, it is now the respect that she truly earned by her own strength. At present, the girl's strength has also reached the limit of the 8th level, but she has rarely encountered a bottleneck. In essence, Fiona's rank in this world has not actually reached the 8th level, and her current strength is completely derived from the girl in another world line. The improvement of the Blood Warlock's strength basically depends on the growth of blood, but at the moment, because of the Advent body, the girl's own strength has far exceeded the maturity of her blood, and the blood can no longer provide support for her breakthrough. This is a very novel experience for Fiona, but after all, there is a 9th level family guardian Silent Kingdom as a backer behind her, so the girl does not feel any sense of urgency. Carlis Province, Carlis City. As the main city of the province of Carlis, although it has experienced a series of wars, it still survives. Now, as the apparent leader of the province, Fiona sits elegantly on the gorgeous throne of the city lord's mansion, handling important government affairs that need her personal review in various parts of the province, while paying attention to the latest intelligence from various places. The situation on the western border of Carlis Province is tense recently. The resistance organization Shadow Dagger has stationed a large number of troops in Donlin City and Kagat City. The spies have detected that a large number of magic-guided mechas have been secretly transported to Donlin City, and it is suspected that there will be a big move soon. The friction between the 4th Princess Rose Knights and the 1st Princess Dawn Knights is getting worse and worse, and it seems that the two sides are about to fall out completely. There is an abnormal astronomical phenomenon in the Wana Plain on the south side of the Empire, and it is suspected that the 9th level beings are fighting. The Wana Plain has now turned into a basin, and the breath of the Royal Guardian has been detected in its center. Saint Messiah III has recently vigorously built churches in various parts of the Saint Messiah Empire, committed to allowing the entire empire to better listen to the teachings of God. Due to the large area occupied, local nobles have some complaints about this. Hearing the last slightly teasing voice, the girl, who was handling official documents with her head down, was stunned. Although she still maintained an elegant posture on the surface, she couldn't help rolling her eyes secretly. Your Majesty, have you been very free recently? Chapter 874 Identity Exposed. How could that be? I've been very busy lately. As the clerk beside him watched without saying a word, Avis casually put the confidential intelligence information in his hand back on the tray and smiled back at Fiona. However, the ripples of fate have brought me inspiration. You may need some help these days. I dare not trouble your Majesty. Fiona can take care of herself. Putting a government document in her hand on the reviewed part slowly, Fiona puffed up her cheeks slightly, staring at Avis with her big lake blue eyes, looking like a majestic duchess. Okay, I believe that. Looking at the girl, who was polite, but vaguely dissatisfied, Avis waved his sleeves with a bit of amusement, signaling all the administrative staff and maids in the city lord's hall to leave. As all the outsiders left, the towering carved bronze door closed with a creaking sound. Avis walked to Fiona's desk, with the hem of his black silk robe rolled up, and leaned on it casually. But Miss Fiona, don't you want to return to your own world line? Return to my world line? Hearing this, Fiona, who was sitting behind the large desk, was stunned for a moment, and then a complex look suddenly flashed in the depths of her eyes. Yes, if nothing goes wrong, you will be able to go back soon. But before that, you need to do something for me. Nodding slightly, Avis stood up again and walked in front of the girl. So what do you need me to do, brother? Fiona raised her head slightly, looked into Avis's black eyes, and asked in a low voice. When did you find out? Avis was stunned for a moment, looking at the girl's eyes staring at him. He was silent for a while, and then laughed, implicitly admitting the girl's guess. It is impossible for a 9th level being to appear out of thin air without any origin, not to mention a 9th level prophet. But I asked His Majesty of the Silent Country, and the family had no information records related to you before. And, when we were together, you always gave me a familiar feeling. The little girl pouted, and looked a little dissatisfied. Why did you hide it from me, brother? I can't always be by your side, Fiona. Nothing can be a better exercise than the real world. Looking at Fiona's angry look, Avis blinked. Besides, my identity should not be difficult for you to guess. However, before Avis could finish his words, the little girl with long light blonde hair suddenly rushed up and crashed into Avis' arms. Brother, I miss you. The girl's voice was already trembling with tears, and the softness deep in Avis' heart also trembled, as if tightly wrapped by this sudden warmth. He gently hugged the girl in his arms, feeling the long-lost and familiar dependence, and a gentle arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. Okay, Faye, everything during this period, I have seen it, you have done a good job. He whispered softly, his voice was low and gentle, slowly flowing in the air, warming the space where only the two of them were alone at the moment. Growing up is always accompanied by loneliness and challenges. I hope you can learn to be independent, not only because I am your brother, but also because you are Fiona, the bright star in the prophecy, with a future of infinite possibilities. But brother, I am very scared. I am afraid that one day I will lose you, just like losing my parents in this world. The girl's tears finally fell, dripping on Avis's clothes, but it seemed to drip into his heart, causing ripples. She leaned against Avis tightly, her voice was as thin as a thread, as if she wanted to pour out all the thoughts and anxiety in her heart. Don't worry, Faye, don't worry, I'm here. Gently patting Fiona's back, Avis softly comforted the sobbing little girl. After a while, Fiona took the initiative to pull out of Avis's arms and reorganized her posture. So what do you need me to do now? The girl's voice still had a hint of nasal tone, but her eyes had gradually returned from sadness to the firmness of the past. Here, put this on and go out with me. With a smile, Avis casually placed a cloak that looked like a misty veil on the table, and then walked towards the small door at the back of the hall. Although Fiona was a little confused, she still put down the documents in her hand, put on the cloak and followed him. Under the cover of the magic cloak, the guards who were guarding the way turned a blind eye to the two people passing by. The two walked through the palaces, walked out of the city lord's mansion, and entered the busy streets of the central city. The afternoon sun fell on the two people, coating them with a layer of light golden hazy light. The city of Carlis is now in a period of rapid recovery after the war. The streets are bustling with people, humans, orcs, elves, dwarves. Whether natives or players, people of all races are in a hurry, but most of them are filled with peace and hope after the war. They are busy shuttling on the streets, trading, talking, or admiring the prosperity of the city. The air is filled with the smell of various foods and spices, the sound of metal knocking from the blacksmith shop in the distance, and the busy figures of craftsmen repairing the damage caused by the war. Avis and Fiona walked in the busy streets one after the other. The noisy crowd passed by them. Under the magic cloak, they seemed to be the bystanders of this prosperous world. Although the noise around them was one after another, they seemed to be in another world. The city is gradually getting back on track. This is your credit. Walking in front, Avis turned his back to Fiona and spoke in a calm voice. War brings pain and destruction, but it also makes people cherish peace more. These are not my own achievements, but the result of everyone's joint efforts. Hearing this, Fiona shook her head gently, and the light golden light cast by the afternoon sun danced in her hair, like a jumping golden elf. Those soldiers who fought to the death to protect their homes in the war, and those craftsmen who quietly repaired the city after the war, everyone worked very hard, and they are the foundation for the recovery of Carlis. The girl's voice was very soft, but it seemed to penetrate the surrounding noise and reach Anba's ears directly. Hearing this, Avis turned his head slightly. His eyes fell on Fiona's soft and firm face through the gap of the magic cloak, and then revealed a trace of gentleness. It seems that you have grown a lot, Faye. Everyone will grow up, not to mention my current situation. Looking at Avis's eyes, Fiona smiled a little embarrassedly, and her big lake blue eyes were shining, as bright as stars. Although I don't have much personal power, since I am in this position, I can always do something for this world. Chapter 875 White Princess. At this moment, the two have walked to the central square of the central city of Karas, where there is a newly erected huge statue. The theme of the statue is a brave warrior, driving a huge magic construct, holding a long sword in his hand, and looking into the distance with a firm gaze. The words Guardian of Karas are engraved on the base of the statue, as well as a dense list of memorials. This is set up to commemorate those warriors who died heroically in the war. Avis stood under the statue for a few seconds, silently looking up at the statue. Is this what you think? It is rumored that I am the savior of the province of Carlis, but I think these unknown warriors are the ones who have paid the most. Fiona also stared at the statue, then secretly glanced at Avis, and spoke seriously. Someone once taught me that a true hero does not necessarily stand in the light. They are willing to use their lives to defend the peace and tranquility of their homeland. At least, this city should remember their names. The sun shone obliquely on the statue, coating those names with a layer of golden brilliance. Fiona's eyes slowly swept across the list, and finally stopped at the names of those strangers. Look, behind the names of these strangers, there are also notes of the number of times they sacrificed. She gently pointed at the list and said, although they are outsiders, since they are willing to fight for Carlis, we will also remember their tenacity and perseverance, and pay tribute to them. Yes, these strangers, they also paid a huge price for the peace of this world. When mentioning this, Anvis looked a little strange. After adding the number of times to the sacrifice list, there was always a strange sense of absurdity. Very good, gaining the support of those strangers will be a great help to you. For strangers, the attitude of the imperial nobles always maintains a subtle sense of distance. Most of them are mainly hired for profit. There are very few lords who can truly treat everyone equally, not to mention erecting statues for players, like Fiona, to commemorate their heroic deeds. But it has to be said that players really like this. According to his observation, Fiona's popularity in the player camp has been unprecedentedly high recently, and many of her past events have been dug up by the spectators. With the in-depth excavation and research of the players, Fiona's image has gradually become fuller. From a noble lady, who was originally loved by her family and carefree, she fell into a situation where her family was destroyed by a powerful enemy, her loved ones were killed, and she shouldered a blood feud. However, after going through hardships, she was still able to stand up tenaciously, and bravely shoulder the responsibility of defending her hometown. The twists and turns of the tragic experience made the player's maternal instincts rise. Coupled with the girl's own super cute appearance, the name of the Princess of the North became more and more famous, and her reputation among the players reached a new height. Turning around, Anvis walked towards the other side of the square, an ancient clock tower that towered into the sky, and Fiona followed closely behind. This clock tower is one of the oldest buildings in the entire city of Carlis. Along the winding stairs, the two climbed up step by step. The stone walls on both sides of the stairs were engraved with the history and legends of Carlis. Walking in it was like traveling through time and space, witnessing its historical development with one's own eyes. Finally, the two came to the top of the clock tower, which is one of the highest points in the city, overlooking the entire city of Carlis. From a high point, the beautiful scenery of the entire city of Carlis is in full view, and the sun shines all over the earth, making every corner of the city bright and warm. A small group of white pigeons flapped their wings and flew up, flying not far above the two of them, casting tiny shadows. "Brother, did you bring me out just to relax?" Looking at Avis's back, Fiona finally couldn't help but speak. "No." Turning slowly, Avis stood under the huge shadow of the bronze bell above his head, staring at Fiona with deep black eyes. "Next, before returning to our timeline, I need to completely control the fate of the Gloria Empire to do something. For this, I need you to help me unify the Gloria Empire." "Me? Unify the Gloria Empire?" Hearing Avis's sudden and almost whimsical request, the girl was stunned for a moment. "Yes, according to the date, you probably have about a year." After looking up at the web of fate, and calculating the movement of the gray fog, Avis lightly set the time. "About a year?" Hearing this even more outrageous time limit, Fiona covered the hood of her magic cloak, and was stunned. "Then, since you, brother, have brought it up, you must have a perfect plan. What should I do?" But the girl quickly calmed down. As a 9th level prophet, Avis would never give her a task that was absolutely impossible to complete. In other words, perhaps the other party saw something that only she could do in the development of fate. Don't underestimate yourself. Now you actually have the power to influence the situation of the Empire. And Wazy smiled lightly. Gloria 3 is missing, the royal guardians ignore the government, the 4 major families collapse, and most of the marquises have fallen. Currently, the only ones who have enough ability to compete for the throne are the 9th rank eldest prince, and the 4th princess, and the 9th prince Lan Noa, who has the support of the new nobles, and secretly controls the construct core. As far as I know, they should have tried to win you over. But even if any party can get the support of the 4 major family alliances, I am afraid it will not play a decisive role." Fiona blinked, and shook her head, looking confused. "Even if I support the most powerful eldest prince, it will be difficult to restore the unity of the Empire within a year." "Indeed, you are right. None of the 3 parties is strong enough to unify the Empire within a year." Listening to Fiona's analysis, Avis suddenly smiled mysteriously. "So now you can only take the position yourself." Hearing this, the little girl's eyes widened even more, and she was so shocked by Avis's sudden suggestion of rebellion that she couldn't speak. Of course, there's a prerequisite for all this, and your personal strength also needs to break through to the 9th level. But Avis did not stop talking, but continued to talk about his plan. To break through the 9th level, you need to find your own way. Originally, you may not need these to break through, but now your bloodline is not mature enough, so you can only break through other methods. For you, this is not a bad thing, but an opportunity. The blood sorcerer's own realm breaks through the 9th level before the bloodline, which has never been seen before. And in the current situation of the continent, you are the child of destiny, and you have my support behind you. The power of the Web of Destiny is enough to push you to the 9th level. In the following half a year, the situation in the Empire has undergone a huge turning point. When the three princes were fighting endlessly, Fiona, as the representative of the four major family camps, joined forces with the 9th Prince Lan Nua, who seemed to be the weakest, and then showed amazing strength. With the final result of the perfect blood plan of Avis, and the latest destruction night magic construct of Lano, a large number of basic destructive power reached the 7th level, and even the 5th generation of magic constructs, the Unifiers, which can release 8th level super level magic, made a brilliant appearance. As the leader of the camp, Fiona used her own high reputation to call on her subordinates to follow her, and personally led the army to conquer all directions, and there was no rival wherever she went. Until the final battle before the capital, a 9th level being disregarded the rules, and took action personally, ready to completely eliminate Fiona. At the most critical moment, Fiona broke through the 9th level on the battlefield. The pure white winter field spread out on the battlefield for the first time. A huge blizzard covered the plain for 3 days. Finally, the attacking 9th level fled with heavy damage. Afterwards, the girl entered the imperial capital of Palaxia with a great victory, and reached an agreement with Lano to merge the original Carlis province and Paravani province into Kalvani province as the new fief of the Olivindi family. Lano temporarily served as the regent of the empire. After breaking through the 9th level, he will officially ascend the throne and become Gloria IV, and appoint the man in the mirror as the chief prophet of the royal family. The eldest prince and the 4th princess chose to give in the face of the irresistible trend, and took charge of the original Fry province and Magna province. And Fiona, as the first meritorious official of the unified empire, ascended the throne as the Duke of Kalvani. People call her the White Princess. Chapter 876 The Initial Cause. As the parties redivided the empire, the war in the Gloria Empire finally subsided. Of course, the most critical factor in the cessation of the war was the disappearance of the Marquises, and the shift of attention of the 9th level beings. As for which prince will take the throne in the end, the royal guardians don't care at all now. As long as the prince still has the blood of the imperial family, and does not violate their contract to protect the royal family, it is enough. After the disappearance of many Marquises, the large number of forces they established privately were leaderless, and even began to attack each other. The rest of the 9th Order beings didn't care about them. As the dark doomsday approached, a feeling of impending disaster had enveloped all the 9th Order beings. At this point, even the slowest 9th Order beings reacted. The private spread of a piece of news, with an unknown source, made these 9th Order beings really crazy. The new 9th Order prophet Grey Mist had the key to escape from this world, and even break through the legendary level. Some 9th rank masters were skeptical at first, but when they investigated the recent whereabouts of the Royal Guardians through their own means, they changed their minds. It was because the Royal Guardians had almost no cover-up in their recent actions. They almost put aside everything and chased after Grey Mist's clues like crazy. If Grey Mist had not been a 9th rank prophet with rich experience in hiding his own whereabouts, and had used many backup plans prepared in advance, he would have been completely locked down and killed long ago. But even now, Grey Mist's situation is becoming increasingly difficult. Being hunted down by a large group of 9th Orders is no joke. Even though he had predicted that he would be hunted down, when it all became a reality, Grey Mist still almost fell into the trap many times. As one of the important factors that triggered all this, Ambus did not go to track down Grey Mist like other 9th Orders, but came alone to a town called Savas, where the former Carlis province and the Little Kingdom Federation meet. Due to the years of war in the Empire, this small town on the border between the two countries has become particularly prosperous. A large number of foreigners of all kinds gather here. Every day, countless people try to cross the border and go to the Federation to escape the war. The influx of a large number of foreigners has caused the public security in Savas to decline rapidly, but it has also made the economy here begin to prosper. In the era of peace and chaos, this place has transformed from a small town to a medium-sized main city, with a population of more than 100,000. Following the guidance of fate, Avis finally locked onto a single-family house in the upper city of Savas. The house was empty at the moment. Avis leaned lightly on the tilted magenta eaves, looking up at the starry sky above his head, waiting for a certain moment to come. Soon, a carriage coming from a distance stopped outside the door, and a slightly shaky figure walked out of the carriage. It was a middle-aged man with brown hair and brown eyes, full of alcohol, holding a copy of the Empire Morning Post in his hand, and it seemed that there was nothing special about him. But in Ambus's perception, the appearance of this middle-aged man is actually always covered with a layer of illusory magic disguise. And under that disguised appearance, It is a face he has seen countless times in the mirror. This middle-aged man who lives here in disguise is Ambus Olivindi in this world. After the Olivindi family was initially captured, he followed the last guidance of his father, Duke Carrot, and used the family's secret treasure to extract his own blood, and then completely changed his identity and blurred the fate line, which concealed the subsequent large-scale search. But surrounded by endless powerful enemies, he dared not do anything, and could only stay dormant in this border city, using alcohol and ordinary appearance as a cover to spend one difficult night after another. The flame of reviving the family was burning in his heart all the time, but he knew that even if he had part of the family's heritage, it would be a foolish dream to rely on these to fight against the enemies faced by the family. If he wanted revenge, the only way was to break through the 9th level, and then he would be qualified to stand on the stage of the Empire. But when he really started to practice hard, he realized how far away the 9th level was. After losing the legendary bloodline that he was once proud of, he fell back on the same starting line as the majority of ordinary professionals. Even because of his unbalanced mentality, his practice speed was not as fast as that of ordinary 7th level professionals. Under the continuous blows, his spirit quickly sank, and he even indulged himself in drinking and having fun with some poor little nobles in the local area every day. He originally thought that life would continue like this, until one day he accidentally saw Fiona's news in the newspaper. She became the spiritual leader of the alliance of the 4 major families, and even received the support of the legendary 9th level Prophet Mirror Man. Because of some things, Ambus in this world did not like his sister. But now, everything in the past is no longer important. The news about Fiona in the newspaper suddenly became the source of support for his soul. The girl conquered cities all the way, and joined forces with the 9th prince, and her reputation became more and more popular. Until now, the war in the Empire has been completely quelled, and the girl has officially ascended to the throne, and become the Duchess of Kalvani province. After seeing all this, Avis's previous dissatisfaction and jealousy towards the girl suddenly disappeared. He staggered into the house, threw the newspaper on the desk, and scanned the empty room, finally landing on a seemingly ordinary wall on the side of the bookshelf. He staggered to the bookshelf, and as his fingers touched several books in a specific order, the rough surface of the wall suddenly disappeared, and a breathtaking oil painting gradually revealed its true appearance. In this painting, the setting sun poured down like molten gold, coating Yuelin Castle with a warm and mysterious glow. The castle stood tall, and below it was a vast sea of white bellflowers, swaying in the wind. Several familiar figures stood in the sea of flowers, including a majestic middle-aged man with blue hair and blue eyes, a gentle lady with blonde hair and purple eyes, and several young men and women with similar looks, some sitting relaxed on the rocks, some holding swords and looking into the distance. Standing in front of this huge painting, he stared at the warm scene on the picture, his fingertips gently touching the uneven handwriting, as if he could still feel the family's past glory and honor flowing through his fingertips. "Let me help you one last time." The low voice of self-talk echoed in the room. With the surge of magic power, the effect of alcohol was quickly purified from his body, allowing his eyes to regain clarity. Looking at the moon castle in the picture, he slowly stretched out his hand. When his fingertips touched the drawing paper, he penetrated it as if nothing was there, and then took out a black and simple stone box from it. The ice blue Olivindi family emblem was imprinted on the dusty box lid. Avis pressed his finger on it, and the eyes of the cold wind crystal bird on the emblem flashed, and then the box lid automatically popped open. In the open box, a spherical crystal with a translucent appearance, the color was always changing, and the core part was still glowing alternately. It was reflected in his eyes, and also appeared in Avis's perception on the roof. Chapter 877 Completed Wishes. The ultimate medium of wishing. And when Avis on the roof sensed its breath, he was suddenly stunned. The breath of this strange wishing ball gave him a very familiar feeling. As a 9th level, the source of every feeling can be perfectly controlled, and Avis quickly traced back to the source of this feeling. Lucky explorer, a miraculous existence, who masters the power of mind and wish, Claire. But according to Claire in this world, she has collected all her fragments. I don't know what the relationship between this wishing ball and her is. In the room, stroking the cold and smooth surface of the crystal ball, Avis of this world was silent for a moment. The idea of wishing to raise himself to the 9th level flashed in his mind, and then dissipated under the influence of reason. That is meaningless. Wish far beyond the control of power, which is equivalent to a gamble. If there is a problem, he may even be annihilated by his uncontrolled power. Moreover, although Fiona seems to be at the peak of his powers now, he knows very well that it is a dangerous thing for the Olivindi family to sit in that position and control an empire that is even beyond the family's peak period with its current state. Even in the best case, if he wishes to become a 9th level extreme, it will only give the Olivindi family one more 9th level extreme, and it will not even reach the strength of the family in its prime. The power accumulated for 1,000 years cannot be wasted like this. After making up his mind, he held a colorful crystal ball, and took out magic materials from the space ring one by one. A special ritual array was quickly completed under the depiction of magic. My life is really ridiculous. Accompanied by muttering to himself, Avis of this world took a last lingering look at the painting, and then he closed his eyes, and the wishing ceremony was activated. Under the gaze of Avis on the roof, as the wish to revive the glory of the Olivindi family fell, a strange scene began to happen. A strong phantom light burst out from the inn, and this light even passed through the wall as if nothing was there, shining softly like a star falling on the earth, so that the whole city could see this wonder. Many professionals were alarmed and rushed over here. And in Avis's perception, there was some kind of extremely grand power that descended here. Fate unfolded in his perception from a strange angle, the future development was rewritten, and some things were connected together by this incredible power. Avis saw the existence of the old secret book, the ordinary virtual game player in the distant world, and the interior of the house. The body and soul of Avis on this timeline merged into the light and disappeared. As the miracle wishing spell ended, the room was empty, and all traces disappeared with the light. It's really wonderful. He casually waved a force to cover the surroundings, causing the professionals who came to investigate to wander around outside the house in confusion. Avis walked into the house, and picked up the crystal ball that had lost its power. He could feel that some of the power seemed to fall on him, and then was absorbed by the silver obelisk left by the high elf prophet hill in his spiritual space. What is that? A moment later, as he expected, Claire appeared in the room, staring at the crystal ball in his hand. A wishing ball, the aura is very close to yours. Looking at the confused blonde half-elf girl, Avis casually threw it to Claire, motioning her to check it herself. Strange, it seems to have been a part of me, but I have no memory of it. Claire took it, and studied it for a while. She did nothing, but the crystal ball suddenly emitted a faint glow and merged into her body. There is a message, it seems to be for you. However, after absorbing the crystal ball, Claire suddenly looked at Avis strangely. Message? Whose? The high elf prophet, Hill, said he would leave this message for the person who gave me the inn. I think he was referring to you. As he spoke, Claire put the crystal ball back in her palm. Under Avis's solemn gaze, a light silver magic light and shadow was projected from it, gathering into a high elf with silver hair and silver eyes. But unlike when Avis first saw him, Hill in this projection looked younger, and his expression was not as smart. And most importantly, the aura around this projection did not have that strange sense of transcendence. It is an honor to meet you, the existence in the prophecy. When you receive this message, we must have already left Unival, the world that once created us, and made our civilization flourish. Looking ahead with empty eyes, Hill spoke solemnly. In the darkest despair, there is still a star of hope, just like the miraculous meteorite from outside the domain that descended into this world with the dark god. Countless years ago, I once used its power to make a wish and obtain the method to destroy these extraterritorial dark existences. When I made this wish, it split into this sub-body, and I also got the method I wanted, although the price required would be my life. I am honored to be able to do all this to create my world. After this, I will use my life as the price to trap them with the help of the underworld-level secret ritual Unival Dream, and use the long years to weaken their power. According to the prophecy it gave me, in the infinitely distant future, an existence that makes it merge with its sub-body will have some power to destroy them. So, I will now tell you the core of the Unival Dream ceremony. As long as you shut it down, you can completely destroy those dark beings when they are at their weakest. Hearing Hill say this, even a calm person like Avis was stunned. I have the power to destroy the gods from outside the domain? Is it true or not? However, looking at Hill's expression, this doubt is destined to remain unanswered. Hill's projection did not know what Avis was thinking. It looked ahead, and continued to speak. But there is one thing I must remind you of. Magic power is the most precious gift this world has given us. When you leave Unival, and go deep into the endless underworld, only the legendary existence, who has mastered the complete power of rules can continue to exert some of their power. Chapter 878 The Limit of the Mortal World. The message left by the High Elf Prophet Hill was not long. After he passed the coordinates of the core hub of the Unival Dream, and the method of dispelling the spell to Avis, the projection disappeared completely. Northern border of the Holy Messiah Empire, Evernight Icefield, Destiny Stone Tower. Facing the inquiring eyes of the blonde half-elf girl Claire, Avis spoke softly. According to the information revealed by the High Elf Prophet Hill, the only way to communicate with the core hub of Unival Dream is through the Destiny Stone Tower located in the Evernight Icefield in the north of the Holy Messiah Empire. The real purpose of the Destiny Stone Tower is that it was left by the High Elf Prophet to communicate with the core hub of the Unival Dream in the depths of the underworld. As for the automatic ringing of the bell, when the fate of the continent turns, it is just a side effect. As for what Hill said before, that he holds the power to destroy the gods from outside the domain, Avis has no idea about it for the time being. Even if he counts the power in his hands in another world, he can't think of anything that may cause harm to the gods from outside the domain. Floating City, Old Secret Book, Perfect Blood. Although these things seemed very powerful in his hands, they were not able to reach the level of true legend. But at this moment, an extremely huge force of destiny suddenly emerged from the void and poured into Avis' body. Is this the power of wishing? Feeling this sudden huge power, Avis was stunned for a moment, and then quickly raised his full attention and began to control his suddenly surging power with all his strength. Although he had seen descriptions of this in the records of the Olivetti family before, only now that the power gained through wishing had truly descended upon him did Avis truly realize how difficult it was to control the power brought by this enhancement. If one compares one's own power to a group of tamed horses, then the power that descended through the wishing technique was like a group of extremely irritable wild horses. As long as one slightly relaxes control, they will begin to rush around restlessly. At this moment, the power that descended through the wishing technique truly pushed Avis to a limit. It was not the ninth order limit in the general sense, but all attributes had reached the true limit that the current world could accommodate. Avis could even feel a faint sense of restraint and rejection in his every move. What did he wish for? Looking at the suddenly stronger Avis, Claire's ice blue eyes revealed doubts. Restore the glory of the Olivetti family. Walking slowly to the window, Avis raised his pale and slender hand and placed it under the weak light by the window. In his sight, he could see invisible chains of rules looming on it. This was the Unival Dream that enveloped the entire Unival world, locking on the foreign objects that suddenly appeared in the world. However, since Anvis had not taken the last step, the power of expulsion had not really descended, allowing him to continue to stay in the main material plane, instead of being directly pulled into the gap between the dream and the real world like the first-generation head of the Olivetti family. Let's go to the Destiny Stone Tower. After taking his hand back, Avis nodded to Claire, then turned and left. It's almost time. In the far north of the St. Messiah Empire, deep in the cold and desolate Evernight Icefield, on the top of the mountains that seemed like the end of the world, an ancient and mottled low stone tower stood alone. The tower was carved with traces of vicissitudes by the years, and frost climbed on the black gneiss bricks, like a silent guardian standing in the long river of time, witnessing the fall and rise of countless stars, quietly waiting for a turning point in fate. This is the important place of the Holy Light Church, guarded by one of the 7 archbishops, the 9th-level extreme priest St. Gormor all year round. But today, the arrival of some uninvited guests broke the eternal silence of this ice field forgotten by the stars. Not only was Anvis ready to go to the Destiny Tower because of the message from the High Elf Prophet Hill. At this moment, the 9th-level prophet Grey Mist, who was being hunted by many royal guardians, also secretly went to the Destiny Tower. That was a special weak point in this world that he had divined in advance, which was connected to the outside world. It was also his only chance of survival. With his current serious injury, he knew that he could not solve the hidden hand left by Avis in a short time, so he simply did not think of a way to solve it. As long as he left this world with the core, all fate connections would be completely cut off. The web of fate could not cover the depths of the endless underworld. As long as he could successfully escape, he would be free to swim in the vast sea and fly in the sky. Of course, executing this plan was also difficult. Not to mention the fate beacon left by Avis on the core, the fact that he was being hunted by a large number of 9th-level beings at the moment made him nervous every day. In order to successfully escape, he had to find a way to temporarily divert everyone's attention, so that it would be convenient for him to secretly go to the Destiny Stone Tower and execute the plan of penetrating the barrier of Unival's dream and entering the underworld. After activating the special clone he had buried countless years ago, which was enough to die for him once at a critical moment, Grey Mist successfully diverted the attention of all enemies who were tracking him, and bought himself a short time. Stepping on the snow-covered mountaintop rock, the gray fog slowly walked towards the simple low door of the stone tower. The cold wind is cold, as a knife blew his hood and the hem of his robe, but it could never blow away the hazy gray fog that permeated around him. However, at the moment of stepping into the tower door, his steps stopped abruptly. A deep chill rose from his heart, not because of the cold frost wind on the mountaintop, but because of the things that appeared in front of him. In the darkness behind the stone door, an endless void that seemed to shine with starlight suddenly lit up, attracting all his attention. The next moment, this strange void suddenly began to collapse inwards, and endless starlight gathered towards the source, eventually turning into a pair of deep eyes. The surrounding environment fell into a brief silence, with only the whistling sound of the mountain wind blowing through the cracks of the stone tower echoing around. "Long time no see." Teacher grunts. After a moment of silence, Gray Mist slowly took off the hood on his head, revealing his true face with gray hair and gray eyes. "My most outstanding student, stop it." Facing Gray Mist's indifferent eyes, Stargazer Brunts's expression showed a trace of compassion, and the old voice with a sigh seemed to penetrate the barrier of time and space, directly hitting the trembling in the deepest part of Gray Mist's heart. Chapter 879 Road to the Underworld. "Teacher, you said?" "Let me stop." Hearing the words of the Stargazer, Gray Mist twitched his mouth, gradually relaxed from the previous stiff state, and his tone returned to indifference. "Now? The maintenance of the dream of Unival is necessary for this world. The moment you open the passage to the underworld, those dark beings lost in the cracks will immediately descend to the main material plane, and countless lives will die. I believe you are also very clear about this." The Stargazer stared at the gray fog with a wise gaze, his voice calm and deep. "So, I won't let you open the passage. You can't save the world either, teacher. Your actions are like using mortal bandages to bandage the wounds of a person cursed by bleeding. It is just a futile delay of the final moment. From the beginning to now, you have always been like this, only caring about the false peace in front of you, but turning a blind eye to the despair of the future." A sneer appeared on Gray Wu's face, and a light gray scale appeared in his hand. On the tray on one side of the scale, the core of Onychaeosa's trioctahedron was shining. "My path is different from yours after all. Between the present and the future, I chose to gain a glimmer of hope for the future. As long as I can escape from Unival alive and leave this world, I will definitely be able to break through the legend, and in the endless years to come, I will find a new world in the depths of the underworld without any threat of darkness. In that world, human beings can truly thrive and grow, instead of waiting for the doomsday in false security." Alas! Looking at the gray fog that had made a decision, the Stargazer sighed. The dream of Unival does need to be opened in the future, but not now, and not by the gray fog in this form. You should know that in your current state, you are not my opponent. Of course I know this, dear Teacher Brunts. Facing the Great Jew, the only remaining 9th rank peak prophet, no matter how cautious I am, it is not too much. So, I specially prepared this for you. Although it can only be used twice at most, it is enough to exert a power infinitely close to the legendary level. There was a sneer on the corner of Gray Mist's mouth, and the scale in his hand trembled slightly, and a terrifying power was brewing in it. Fate is fair. Any existence covered by the web of fate has its own weight of existence. And the lower level of fate, within the power range of the scale, will not be able to interfere with the upper level in any form. Now, let us measure the weight of your own destiny, compared with the part of a true outer god? As the voice fell, Gray Mist directly activated the gray scale in his hand. With a light click, the pillar in the center of the scale suddenly cracked with a hideous crack. At the same time, an invisible and noble and magnificent force suddenly descended, covering the entire mountain top. A group of void-colored gas shining with starlight, symbolizing the Stargazer, appeared at the other end of the scale tray, but as time passed, the side, where the core of Onychaeos was placed still slowly sank. "Is this your plan?" The Stargazer frowned slightly. He could feel that as the tray sank, an invisible force of destiny enveloped his body. This force was not lethal, but temporarily isolated him from the world. This isolation was strong, but not lasting. The Stargazer could even sense that this isolation could only last for half a magic time, and then it would collapse because it could not be maintained. But this period of time was obviously enough for Gray Mist to do what he wanted. The source of this power comes from the gray metal balance, which is now emitting a faint sound of being overwhelmed, and is gradually collapsing. The power of Onychaeos' core is not something Gray Mist can fully control, so he can only make it into a temporary prop to delay the time. "You can leave for now, teacher. Next, this is my stage." Looking at the Stargazer trapped by the power of the balance, Gray Mist breathed a sigh of relief. For him, the most important enemy in the Stargazer plan had been temporarily solved by him. Next, as long as he used the last effect of the scale to solve another enemy in his plan who might threaten him, his plan to escape from Unival would be a sure thing. "What a lively scene, you two." At this moment, a peaceful voice sounded from midair, making Gray Mist's expression darken again. In midair, A black-haired, black-eyed boy who appeared at some point in time walked down slowly and gracefully, as if he was stepping on invisible steps. A hooded figure followed him. From the 2 or 3 strands of pure golden hair scattered under the hood, the light cherry mouth, and the round nose, it can be vaguely seen that it is a girl. The person in the mirror, you finally dare to show up? Recognizing the unique fade line of the person, Grey Mist held the scale and looked at Avis with a stern expression. Why shouldn't I dare? Avis smiled, and the pure white magic dress glowed in the aurora of the long night of the ice field. The core of Onychaos has been in your hands for a long time. Now it's time to return it to its original owner, Lord Grey Mist. Haha, in that case, come and get it. Listening to Avis's logic, Grey Mist laughed and raised the scale with a narrow crack in his hand again, facing Avis. The magnificent power of fate that once trapped the stargazer descended again, and a colorless gas with a little silver light appeared on the tray at the other end of the scale. But unlike the stargazer, this time, after the tray swung up and down several times, it actually began to gradually tilt towards the side representing Avis's breath. What? Looking at this result, Grey Mist's eyes revealed a deep disbelief. Even the 9th level peak stargazers would be temporarily trapped by the power of Libra. How can you, a newly promoted 9th level prophet, be higher in status than the stargazers? Unfortunately, the trump card you prepared seems to be ineffective against me. Sensing the fluctuations of the power of destiny, Avis's expression did not change. The core of Onychaos is indeed of high status, but it is obviously not as good as the mysterious silver-white obelisk left by the High Elf Prophet Hill. The next moment, as if it was the price of the failed restraint, under the unwilling gaze of Grey Mist, accompanied by a crisp cracking sound, the gray scale suddenly broke into 2 halves. But at this moment, Grey Mist's expression became ruthless, and he suddenly picked up the fallen Onychaos core, and then rushed into the Destiny Stone Tower without looking back. In this regard, Claire, who was wearing a hood, couldn't help but look at Avis, but the latter did not move, just quietly waiting for something. Dong. The next moment, an illusory and vicissitudes of ancient bells suddenly rang, as if it came from the eternal and distant time and space. Dong, dong, dong. At the same time, every brick of the tower lit up with silver-white light, and the endless illusory bells echoed between the mountains and the ice field. All the monsters living on the Evernight ice field instinctively looked in the direction of the bells, and then ran madly in the opposite direction of the Destiny Stone Tower in a great fear, as if they had seen their natural enemy. What's going on? This huge movement could no longer be covered by the magic that Grey Mist had arranged before. Archbishop Gormor was immediately alarmed and looked at the top of the mountains, where the Destiny Stone Tower was located. In his sight, a brilliant silver-white beam of light, with the stone tower as its foundation, penetrated straight into the depths of the cold night sky filled with aurora. Where the beam of light finally landed, a crack like an eye slowly opened, and on both sides of the crack, all kinds of wonderful scenes of the dream world flashed by in an unpredictable manner. And at the deepest part of the crack, the dark sea flashing with dark starlight revealed its true appearance. Chapter 880 The World in the Mirror. This astonishing scene immediately attracted the attention of many high-level beings. Without the magic of fate covering it, Grey Mist's actions were immediately exposed. Knowing that they had been deceived, other 9th level beings immediately tried to cross the space to rush over, but found that the space within the Evernight ice field had been disrupted by some force in advance and could not be transmitted. As a former 9th level prophet, Grey Mist might not be able to stop the arrival of Mirrorman Anvis and Stargazer Brents, but the arrangements he left behind were easy to delay others for a short time. At the same time, in the study room on the top floor of Moon Castle in the far north of the Gloria Empire, Avis, wearing a long black cloak, stepped out from the shadow of a corner of the bookshelf and walked under the slanting sunlight of the huge stained glass window. Is it time to go back? Sensing the appearance of Avis, Fiona, who was looking out the window with her chin in her hand, turned her head slightly, and a look of joy flashed in her big lake blue eyes. Yes, it's almost time. Next, we will soon return to the original timeline. Nodding slightly, Avis walked to Fiona's side and looked out at the cloudless sky outside the towering arch window, as well as the flocks of migrating white birds. I see. Do I need to make any preparations? Hearing the expected answer, the girl nodded vigorously, her long, soft light gold hair slightly lit up, proving that her master was in a very happy mood at the moment. Prepare? No, but before we leave, we may be able to see something more unique. With a mysterious smile, Avis materialized a strange illusory round mirror in midair, while the girl tilted her head in doubt. With a wave of ripples on the water, some images appeared vaguely on the surface of the lens, and then quickly became clear. It was the scene around the stone tower of destiny. At this moment, a beam of light that connected the sky and the earth was emitted from the top of the stone tower, connecting to the dark narrow crack in the sky that looked like an eye. Is this the stone tower of destiny of the Holy Messiah Empire? What's on that light? Fiona opened her eyes wide in surprise, looking at the scene in the mirror in confusion. That crack. Staring at the image in the mirror, Avis spoke in a low voice. That is the coming doomsday. You just let him go? Under the Tower of Destiny, looking at the gray fog that seemed to have escaped along the beam of light, Claire looked at the black-haired boy beside her, who was looking up at the night sky without any attempt to stop it. He has nowhere to go. Avis smiled calmly at Claire's doubts. Great. Is that your world deduction? At this time, an old voice suddenly came from the side. Yes, I wonder if Mr. Stargazer has any advice? Turning his eyes to the source of the voice, Avis looked at the Stargazer who seemed to have given up struggling, with an interested look. Now, this should be our second meeting, right? After taking a deep look at Avis, the Stargazer touched his translucent spiral beard and spoke hoarsely. When a prophet breaks through the 9th level, he will receive an additional gift from the Web of Fate. I call this ability world deduction. It seems that the effect of your world deduction ability is to create a false fate. World deduction? Listening to the old voice of the Stargazer, Avis gently raised his right hand, and a crystal-like illusory round mirror emerged in his palm. I prefer to call it the world in the mirror. As Avis moved, the image of the low stone tower of fate was reflected in the mirror. But strangely, the stone tower looked ordinary in the mirror, with no mighty beam of light or huge cracks like eyes extending from the top. Here, the fate of the real world will be temporarily replaced with the world in the mirror. Although everything will develop like the real world, only the world in the mirror will change. Holding the illusory round mirror, Avis smiled indifferently. Of course, due to my personal strength, when the simulated dark existence descends, I am afraid that this reflection will be unable to withstand it, and will collapse directly. It is a pity for Mr. Bruntz to laugh at me. Alas. Looking at this scene, the Stargazer sighed again. As my student, he has actually done very well. It's a pity he met you. Isn't it what you want to see that he was stopped by me? Avis calmly looked at the Stargazer who seemed to have a compassionate look. In his heart, the threat of the Stargazer was actually much greater than that of the Grey Mist. Even though the Stargazer looked like he was being plotted against by the Grey Mist at this moment, he would not relax his guard. At this point, the two of them suddenly turned their heads slightly, and looked in a certain direction. At this moment, a white light like the dawn suddenly appeared in the dark sky in the distance. It was the brilliance of the holy power of more than one 9th level priest. Not surprisingly, the first to arrive under this huge momentum were the rulers of this land, the archbishops of the Holy Light Church. The leader of the group was the current Holy Light Church Pope Saint Messiah III. What was a little unexpected was that the Pope was surging with an extremely strong holy power glow, even more powerful and dazzling than the previous saintly state of Yanel. God said that the darkness will retreat. Without any greetings, many clergymen took action directly, and an extremely large holy white magic circle emerged in the night sky, blocking the huge crack in the sky. Due to the cover of Avis's mirror world, the Pope and others who came did not immediately notice the existence of Avis and others, but in contrast, the illusory round mirror in Avis's hand burst into a crack the moment the Pope descended. It is indeed an amazing power. Is this the truth of the Holy Saint plan hidden by the Pope? Avis was somewhat surprised by the power displayed by Saint Messiah III. Unlike Yanel, who could only maintain the Holy Saint form for a short time before, the Pope's state was obviously more perfect. He did not completely transform into a light man, but his eyes simply turned into a blazing white color, and his skin showed a strange texture like a light crystal. Compared with Yanel's aura of the midday sun, Saint Messiah III was like the rising sun, with a gentler and more restrained aura, but the sacred and inviolable majesty was even better. If it were not for the suppression of the Univar dream, Avis had no doubt that the current Pope could break through the legend at any time. Chapter 881 Return. Under the joint suppression of many 9th level priests, the crack in the night sky was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, at the critical moment when the huge crack like an eye was suppressed to only a thin crack, something strange suddenly broke out in the depths of the crack in the night sky. Today, I will be a legend. The shining cold light came from outside the crack, accompanied by the breath of gray fog that had expanded countless times at this moment. Outside the crack of the nether sea, the figure of the gray fog with strange glow around it attracted everyone's attention in a strange way, as if it were a spiritual attraction. Compared to the huge crack in the sky that was dozens of miles long, the gray fog's body was extremely small, but the glow from his body was as eye-catching as a star. The core of Onychaeos' square trioctahedron had collapsed at this moment, turning into countless tiny silver light particles surrounding his body. "Is it you?" Seeing Grey Mist's true form revealed, Saint Messia III frowned slightly and recognized this famous prophet, who was the third to be promoted to the 9th level, and was recently hunted by a large number of 9th level masters. It seems that the other party has really successfully escaped and is now preparing to be promoted to a legend. Seeing Grey Mist's actions, the actions of the several archbishops present all slowed down. As a being who was trapped at the peak and could not make any progress, now seeing someone trying to take that step, even if the two sides are now in a hostile position in theory, they still have respect for the pioneer. The other party chose to try to break through in the depths of the rift. There must be a reason. Then, they might as well take a look at the situation first. Regardless of everyone's different thoughts, Grey Mist's breakthrough progress continued steadily. The silver light particles formed by the core of Onychaeos formed a river of light, flowing around him, and the rule power contained in it was fully unfolded, confirming Grey Mist's own path. Grey Mist did not choose to absorb the core completely, nor did he dare to do so. What he really needed was the part of the source substance contained in the core that belonged to the legendary status, and the truly complete rules contained in the core of Onychaeos' sub-body, as an important reference for the future. The moment he stepped into the underworld, he completely lost his sense of future destiny, and at the same time felt a strange sense of nothingness. Under a certain instinctive sense of vigilance and suppression, he did not choose to leave the crack too far, but chose to break through immediately. The process of the gray fog breaking through was smoother than everyone expected. Under the gaze of Avis, the stargazer, and many clergy, the breath of the gray fog finally broke through a subtle critical point. At that moment, he was like a real star, hanging high in the endless night sky, and the unique legendary complete willpower turned into ripples, gently sweeping across the entire main material world. At this moment, the elves far away in the overseas continent were all alarmed and looked towards the direction of the Yar continent. Even ordinary people without any power could feel as if a gust of wind was blowing through the depths of their souls. However, the many clergymen who were watching the gray fog break through in the sky above the Destiny Stone Tower did not pay much attention to this scene. Their attention was completely attracted by another huge change at this time. Under the horrified gaze of the crowd, a huge dark red eyeball, which was so huge that it was almost unimaginable, silently appeared behind the gray fog that was in the process of breaking through, just like the moon appearing behind a satellite. In front of this eyeball, the huge black crack in the night sky that was dozens of miles long seemed to have become the white of its eye. Even if they just looked at it, the mental space of many 9th level beings began to show signs of instability at this moment. Crazy and chaotic whispers emerged from the corners of their minds. At this moment, the gray fog in front of this eyeball noticed something was wrong. A sense of trembling and despair of impending disaster emerged in his heart, and his whole body was as stiff as petrified. He didn't dare to turn his head, nor did he dare to sense the existence behind him in any way. His instinct was screaming wildly, warning, urging him to escape from here immediately at any cost. Unlike the crowd, who could only see one eyeball through the crack, behind him, almost endless blood-red eyeballs emerged from the deep sea of the underworld. 7 colors were modeled, but it was like a layer of rusty brown color covered with corrupt paint, spraying between these eyeballs. Those evil eyes were entangled around him, as if they had substance, licking him gently like invisible tentacles. Unlike the clones that had appeared in the main material plane, it was the real great existence, who lived outside the world. But at this moment, a crisp cracking sound suddenly sounded in the air. The moment the giant eyeball appeared, the illusory round mirror in Avis's hand had already quickly climbed up a large number of cracks, and finally couldn't hold on at this moment, and broke into 2 halves from the center. As all this happened, the mirror world completely collapsed, and the light column at the top of the Destiny Stone Tower, the huge crack in the night sky, and the dark red giant eye disappeared like a bubble. In the night sky, the bishops, who came temporarily, appeared at the edge of the eternal night ice field at a loss. Grey Mist, who seemed to have broken through to the legendary level before, now maintained the posture of grasping the core, and reappeared in front of the Destiny Stone Tower. As the desperate pressure of being unable to escape suddenly disappeared, Grey Mist suddenly relaxed all over his body, and his body almost couldn't control the power and fell to the ground. As his mind regained clarity, Grey Mist looked at the suddenly changed environment around him. His eyes were a little confused at first, and then he instantly understood everything that had just happened, and his expression became extremely complicated. How does it feel to break through the legend, Lord Grey Mist? In front of him, Avis slightly spread his hands, maintaining the posture when they just met, and looked at him calmly. No. I don't believe it. The man in the mirror, you are lying to me. Staring at Avis's face, Grey Mist grasped the core of Onychaos, and spoke in an extremely hoarse and difficult voice. "Cheat you? He." Looking at Grey Mist's denial, Avis laughed. "Don't hypnotize yourself anymore, Lord Grey Mist. You used to be a 9th level prophet. Can you still deceive yourself?" As he spoke, Avis waved his hand gently, and the core in Grey Mist's hand automatically flew up and fell into his hand. "Then, what are you going to do?" Looking at Avis holding the core, the Stargazer suddenly spoke. "Leave the core, the man in the mirror, it doesn't belong to you." As if to prove his words, the holy white light fell from the sky, and Saint Messiah III and a group of bishops reappeared. "What should I do?" Amid the attention of everyone, Avis smiled. "Goodbye." Chapter 882, Sudden Attention. Faced with Avis's elusive and calm attitude, the archbishops who returned felt provoked, and their eyes showed more or less vigilance and coldness. "Goodbye? You can't go anywhere." Saint Messiah III frowned, raised his crystal-clear right hand, and grabbed in the direction of Avis. At the same time, a sacred, grand, and irresistible force field descended like the sky, and the dazzling white holy light instantly enveloped the entire mountaintop, and the space was faintly crystallized. God's grace is like the sea, and God's power is like a prison. However, just as the power of Saint Messiah III was approaching, a faint silver light suddenly emanated from Avis's body. The light was very soft, but the dazzling holy light around it seemed to be in a different world from it, and could not cover its brilliance at all. At the same time, the Onychaos core in Avis's hand turned into countless tiny silver light particles, just like it was in Grey Mist's hand before, surrounding his body. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" This incomprehensible scene immediately attracted Grey Mist's horrified gaze. Only when you really come into close contact with the dark gods from outside the domain can you experience the fear and despair that penetrates deep into your bones. Absolutely irresistible. It was like an ant instinctively trembling when facing its natural enemy. If it weren't for the shattering of the mirror world of Avis at the last moment, his will would have almost melted and been completely assimilated into that huge eyeball and part of the rusty existence. You know, he deliberately left the coverage of the Univar dream and entered the Nether Sea before daring to start absorbing the legendary source in the core, but even so, he still had the bad luck to bump into the dark existence from outside the domain. Now, the person in the mirror dared to absorb Onychaos' core directly in the main material world. After absorbing the legendary essence in the core, although it will not be rejected by the dream world immediately, the legendary essence that is incompatible with the main material world will almost certainly be locked by the dream of Unival. As time goes by, this rejection will become stronger and stronger until the target is sealed in the gap between the real world and the dream world, which is also the location of the sealed dark existences in ancient times. Is the person in the mirror crazy? Even if he wants to fight the Pope, he shouldn't use this self-destructive method. What kind of power is this? On the other side, when the Stargazer saw the faint silver light emanating from Avis, he showed a look of inquiry and thought, as if he had gained some kind of understanding from it. The next moment, in a dazzling light, Avis' figure suddenly melted into a light spot and disappeared completely. What? This sudden scene shocked everyone present. Saint Messiah III opened his eyes slightly in disbelief, and used his holy power to search the surrounding space thoroughly, and even tried to forcefully trace the traces of Avis's departure, but all means were completely ineffective at this moment, and Avis's existence seemed to have disappeared directly from the world. As Avis disappeared, the eyes of the clergy moved to Claire, who had been standing behind Avis before, but the half-elf girl just waved her cloak slightly, and her figure disappeared in a burst of 7-color light. When her body was restored to its original state, her power had also been restored to the limit that this world could accommodate. The temporary blockade set up by the Pope did not constitute an obstacle for her. When the two left in their own way in public, the eyes of the bishops, who felt ashamed and full of anger, immediately moved to the remaining two intruders. Facing these hostile gazes, the Stargazer smiled slightly, floated up, and left calmly in a seemingly ordinary flying posture. The power that Grey Mist had previously used the core of Onychaos as a medium to isolate him from the world was still maintained. In this state, he could not interfere with anything in the main material plane, but he was also immune to all attacks from the main material plane. A bishop couldn't help but try to stop him, but the attack was like facing an illusion, and it just passed through in vain. "I need an explanation for what happened here just now, Lord Grey Mist." As the Stargazer left, everyone's eyes were focused on Grey Mist, who was still at the scene. Saint Messiah III spoke indifferently, and an invisible pressure directly locked Grey Mist. Feeling the cold gazes of the Pope and the bishops, a drop of cold sweat silently fell on Grey Mist's forehead. When Anvis activated the silver obelisk left by the High Elf Prophet Hill, who was attached to his soul, he felt that the time of the whole world seemed to suddenly stagnate, and everything in his eyes slowed down to near stillness. The snowflakes that swept across the sky were frozen in the night sky, and everyone's expression was clearly presented in front of him at this moment. The horror of the gray fog, the anger of the bishops, the holy indifference of the Pope, the thoughtful stargazers, and the somewhat worried gaze of Claire standing behind him. And those eternally flowing silver light particles of legendary essence, at this time, seemed to be independent of the world, and continued to flow into his soul. In this state, as if time had stopped, Avis could still sense Claire beside him, and Fiona in a very distant direction. The two souls from the same world line as him were still shining in his perception. But just when Avis was about to return to the original world line, a sudden change came. Snap! With a crisp sound that seemed to come from the soul, the originally still night sky suddenly shattered like a mirror. Behind the narrow and long broken crack, a huge scarlet eyeball looked down, and the slippery gaze, like a tentacle, instantly climbed on Avis's body. A sense of panic, as if his heart was suddenly strangled, filled Avis's whole body, and even made him feel suffocated. But fortunately, the power that brought him back to the original world line finally took effect. It seemed that a long time had passed, and it seemed that it was just a moment. When Avis came to his senses, the world around him had changed from the cold, snowy mountain top to the silver metal style interior of the great library of the city of origin. His body was still in the state when the old secret scripture was activated, but the core of the great library in front of him, the originally silver perfect sphere, was now covered with cracks on the surface, and the color had turned into a dull gray-black. After calming down his rapid breathing, Avis raised his right hand and touched his forehead, and found that it was full of cold sweat. Chapter 883, The Last Prophecy. What happened here? Your aura? At this time, the guardian of the Olivendi family, Silver Einstein, who had been guarding outside, rushed in, and was shocked to find that Avis's aura had changed. The three eyes were stunned for a moment. Nothing, just a little accident. Putting down his hand that had instinctively pressed on the old secret book, Avis let out a long breath, raised his blue eyes, and looked at Einstein, who had rushed over. The power that was inadvertently revealed in his eyes even made the latter feel a little dazzling. Also, long time no see, Mr. Einstein. You are already at the 9th level. This is impossible. What on earth happened here? Looking at Avis in disbelief, Einstein subconsciously activated several magic accessories on his body that could break illusions, and his mental power frantically explored the surroundings, trying to find any inconsistencies. Please don't worry, you are not hallucinating. Looking at Einstein's actions, Avis shook his head speechlessly. Because the current power levels of the soul and body are not well matched, he is trying to adjust his body. This is the feeling of completeness. The wishing ball? At this moment, Claire, who was standing under the dim sphere that had completely lost its power, also came back to her senses. The blonde half-elf girl stroked the cracks on the surface of the sphere in front of her, glanced at Avis, and spoke thoughtfully. Yes, the wishing ball. I do know its whereabouts in this world. It should be kept in the treasure house of the Olivendi family. Feeling the clear gaze of the half-elf girl, Avis readily told the whereabouts of the wishing ball in the questioning look on Silver Einstein's face. How did you know? Then, the boy walked slowly to the girl, gently held her hand, and said firmly, Don't worry, I will get it for you. Okay. Claire was stunned for a moment when Avis suddenly grabbed her hand, and then turned her head away unconsciously, her cheeks slightly flushed, and she responded softly in an ethereal voice. It's time to go back. We should have found what we are looking for. Nodding slightly, Avis let go of Claire and turned to leave the library. But at this moment, Claire and Einstein's eyes suddenly changed when they looked at Avis. Behind Avis, a small dark red eyeball had quietly appeared at some point, and was looking around strangely. Behind you, there's an eyeball. Sensing the sudden change in the two people's expressions, Avis immediately realized that something was wrong. His powerful mental power scanned his body carefully inside and out, but he didn't find anything abnormal at all. It seemed that the strange eyeball could only be seen with the naked eye. With his brows furrowed, thinking of the experience of being watched by the huge eye at the last moment, Avis was blessed with his mind and directly activated the original form of the old secret book. The cover of the heavy ancient book hanging on the dark silver book chain flashed a dark green glow. As the true form appeared, a complex desire intertwined with fear and impulse suddenly passed from the old secret book to Avis's spiritual sea. The old secret book was longing for something in him. Before Avis could continue thinking, the dark green thick book floated up by itself and fell directly behind him, directly covering the eyeball. The next moment, a huge suction force came from the blank page in the back half of the thick book, trying to seal the dark red eyeball inside. However, the sealing power of the old secret book, which had been invincible, was now frustrated for the first time. The small dark red eyeball emitted a faint red light, staring at the unsealed old secret book in front of it, and was in a stalemate for a while. As the power of the old secret book enveloped it, the strange and hazy power that had previously covered the scarlet eyeball dissipated, and Avis's mental power finally detected the existence of the eyeball. When he could sense it, Avis used his own rule power to wrap the small eyeball and cut it off at the root. With no attachment, the stalemate between the eyeball and the old secret book finally ended. After the last flash of light, it was finally sealed into the page with difficulty. Afterwards, the old secret book fell into Avis's hands with satisfaction, like some kind of well-fed little animal. Avis opened the book in his hand, and on the latest page, a lifelike eyeball pattern was clearly visible. He is watching you. As Avis stared, the pages of the book reflected the brief information of the seal. But just like the seal of Red Cup, the old secret book once again showed incomplete information, as if it did not dare to present his name. At the same time, the pages of the old secret book flashed, and a special feeling appeared in Avis's heart. This feeling is, can the prophecy part continue to turn the page? Avis's heart moved slightly, and the pages of the old secret book turned forward, and soon turned to the prophecy part at the beginning. Previously, the last few pages were stuck together by some unknown force, and could not be opened. But now, after turning to the last page that could be opened before, Avis just paused for a moment, and then turned to the next page without any hindrance. As expected, the old pages opened a new chapter again, which was also the last part of the prophecy in the text. Looking up at the sky was broken. The long night has come, and the stars have returned to their positions. The twin suns are setting. The dark stars are hanging high. The strange moon was hazy. The light of the stone tower was bright. Unlike the previous prophecies, the last prophecy was in a strange ballad style. The ancient book page quickly turned to the last page, but when it turned to the last page, Avis was suddenly stunned. That page should have recorded the last, perhaps the most important, prophecy of the old days. But at this moment, Avis could not see any words on this page. An unknown darkness completely stained the entire page. Avis's gaze seemed to have triggered some kind of switch, and from the strange darkness, a stream of dark red blood, full of evil and madness, suddenly seeped out. They squirmed abominably, flowed crazily, and in the center of the dark page, formed a line of distorted characters that were a little blurry, but exuded great malice. The end is coming. What the few people who had not yet returned from the ruins of the Eternal City did not know, was that at the moment, when Avis and others returned from another world line, the bell of the Destiny Stone Tower standing on the side of the Eternal Night Icefield suddenly rang. And this time, the bell rang 12 times in a row. The leaders of the 3 major countries on the continent were alarmed by this incident, and began to investigate what happened. At the same time, the Stargazer was also alarmed by the sudden shaking of the continent's web of destiny. After some investigation, he quickly came to a conclusion that was completely unbelievable to him. In the web of destiny, a second 9th level prophet appeared, who should not exist. Chapter 884 Avis and the Stargazer. Who is it? After discovering this astonishing fact, even though his own condition was extremely bad at the moment, the Stargazer still immediately left the healing state, risking the backlash afterwards, and traced the breath imprints of all the high-level prophet in the current continent at the core layer of the web of fate. It is impossible for a 9th level prophet to appear out of thin air. It must be that a previous high-level prophet used some means to bypass his arrangement, and successfully broke through the 9th level. As the Stargazer moved, a large amount of aura entered his perception in an instant, and he instantly realized the problem. The aura of the little fellow from the Olivendi family, the prophet codenamed Mirror, completely disappeared from his perception. This disappearance was so complete that even with his authority in the web of fate, he could not detect the other party's aura. There were only 2 possibilities. Either the other party had suffered some huge backlash from fate before, and had completely lost the ability of a prophet at this moment, or the other party had broken through at this moment, and became a 9th level prophet with the same level of authority as him, which made him unable to detect it. Before that, the web of fate had not been shaken by the fall of a high-level prophet. Of the 2 possibilities, it was obvious which one was the truth. To be honest, this surprise was a bit too big. Another 9th level prophet appeared in this era, which directly disrupted all his previous plans, and also released his previously sealed memory of his breakthrough to the 9th level. After a long sigh, the Stargazer was silent for a moment, took out a pair of magic crystal balls, and then handed one of them to the magic messenger, asking it to go to the Olivindi family station and hand it over to Anvis. After the white cat-like magic messenger left, the stargazer looked at the crystal ball in front of him in silence, as if waiting for something. After a moment, the crystal ball in front of him suddenly flickered twice, and then lit up, and Avis's magic image appeared in it. "Mr. Stargazer, long time no see." At the other end of the crystal ball, Avis stroked his chest slightly to greet him. When he became a 9th level prophet, and absorbed the legendary essence of Onychaos's core in another world line, his current strength has truly reached the ceiling of this world, and there is no need to hide it anymore. Moreover, the attitude of the Stargazer in this world towards him was not completely hostile, and he was somewhat curious about what the Stargazer was going to say. "Anvis Olivindi, I'm sorry to meet you in this era. I have to say that you are a true genius. Although I don't know how you did it, you still succeeded." Looking at Anvis in the crystal ball, the Stargazer's tone was bleak. "Your breakthrough has indeed changed the fate of the Olivindi family's destruction in a short period of time, and also changed the future of the Gloria Empire, and even the overall pattern of the Yar continent. From your perspective, I can understand your choice. However, when all these destinies were rewritten, the child of destiny who could continue to grow with the development of the times, and eventually end the dark doomsday, could no longer appear. Since you have become a 9th level prophet, you should also know what we will face next. Those ancient dark existences outside the domain have relocked this world. And as the fate of the world has been completely rewritten by you, I can no longer see any hope of dealing with the doomsday. The ancient darkness will eventually cover Unival again. Sir Stargazer, do they really have no weaknesses?" Looking at the completely pessimistic Stargazer, Avis frowned slightly. "Since there will be a child of destiny, who will end the dark doomsday in the future, it means that they also have weaknesses that can be solved in some way. You are right, but I don't know how the child of destiny in the future will solve the doomsday. Maybe it will be an opportunity that will appear in the future. But no matter what, that scene is completely beyond my prediction range, and cannot be detected by any means." In response to Avis's question, the Stargazer was very frank at this moment. As for their possible weaknesses, perhaps they are only weak because they have been lost in the cracks for too long. But no matter how weak they are, we cannot fight them. That is fundamentally different. Below the legendary realm, we have incomplete willpower, and cannot even understand their true existence, let alone destroy them. There is no hope. Run away, child. No matter what, leave this world and run as far as possible. The attitude of the Stargazer made Avis fall into a long silence. But at this moment, the message that the image of the High Elf Prophet Hill had told him, that he had some power that could end the dark doomsday, flashed through his mind. "Sir Stargazer, can you sense anything in me that may be related to the elimination of the dark doomsday?" "You?" Hearing this, the Stargazer looked at Avis with some doubt. "You are a variable, but in the predetermined fate, I can't see that scene. Don't think too much. For the sake of continuation, running away is not shameful. The Continental Magic Council will also launch a plan to escape from this world. If you need anything, you can also tell me. The Continental Magic Council will not be your enemy. From the perspective of the entire civilization, as long as any of us can survive, the fire of mankind will at least not be extinguished. In this case, Mr. Stargazer, I have a request." Staring at the Stargazer on the other side of the crystal ball, Anvis finally made his request. After ending the contact with Anvis, Stargazer directly contacted the other two speakers of the Continental Magic Council, Mystery Seeker Alvani and Ring of Space and Time Vernica. After the three of them had a short secret meeting, Orvani, who was in charge of external affairs, directly issued a notice to the entire Yar continent in the name of the Continental Magic Council, hoping to have an open dialogue with the new 9th level Prophet Mirror. When this news came out, the world was shocked. The appearance of the second 9th rank prophet just fulfilled the previous phenomenon of the Tower of Destiny ringing 12 bells in a row. At the same time, keen people have also sensed the unusualness of the announcement of the Continental Magic Council. First of all, this announcement is equivalent to indirectly verifying the identity of the mysterious Prophet Mirror as a 9th rank prophet. A 9th rank prophet, who can be promoted under the control of the Stargazer, must have his own unique and outstanding features. Secondly, the Continental Magic Council issued an open meeting invitation to the other party with an equal attitude, which means that the Continental Magic Council intends to form an alliance with the other party and hopes that the other party will make its identity public. Combined with the two, many people are curious about the true identity of Mirror and whether the other party will agree to meet. And in the expectation of the outside world, the reply from the mysterious Prophet Mirror soon appeared. Agree to meet. Chapter 885 Trader. Glorious Calendar Year 2470, Scarlet Rain Month, 22nd day. This meeting, which has attracted great attention from the top leaders of the three major countries on the continent, was held at the headquarters of the Continental Magic Council, the Sky City of Orisian. When the broadcast of this meeting by the Magic Crystal Ball appeared in the outside world, everyone was stunned. The three supreme speakers of the Continental Magic Council appeared at the same time, and their makeup was particularly grand. Even Vernica, who had previously worn the most casual ring of time and space, was now rarely dressed in a complex and elegant magic dress from head to toe. The person the three of them were meeting at the moment, the handsome young man sitting opposite the three speakers, was the descendant of the head of the Olivindi family, one of the four major families in the Gloria Empire, Ambus Olivindi. At the scene, the few people had a brief and friendly exchange, and finally made an agreement that both sides would not invade each other. As the content of this meeting was exposed, the entire Yar continent was in an uproar. Ambus's specific background and identity were also quickly spread at the first time. The fourth son of Duke Carlos, born with high-purity double legendary blood, is currently a student at Pamir College and has not yet held a coming-of-age ceremony. This resume is incredible to everyone who sees the information. It is no longer simply a genius or a demon, but only absurdity. Duke Carlot, known as the youngest 9th level in the history of the Empire, is not even at the 7th level at Ambus's current age. How can Ambus Olivindi become a 9th level, even a 9th rank prophet? After receiving the report, many major forces in the Gloria Empire suspected that there was something wrong with the intelligence, or that the other party was disguising their appearance. But then, when the Olivindi family suddenly announced to the outside world that Ambus was appointed as the new head of the family, everyone had to start thinking about how to treat the Olivindi family in the future. Those who were once hostile to the Olivindi family were now even more restless, as if they had lost their parents. Ambus Olivindi? 9th rank prophet? How is this possible? Arc Marquis Territory, Light of Hope Legion Headquarters. In the brightly lit conference room, the direct descendant of the Marquis Arc, the heroic young Knight Legion leader Alyssa Arc, sat at one side of the round table, looking at the latest intelligence, her golden red eyes widened in disbelief. This is impossible, he is still my classmate, and even joined the True Knowledge Society at the same time as me. How could he become a 9th rank prophet? But this is indeed true. Perhaps it is a miracle from the legendary gods. On the other side of the round table, the son of Destiny, Lanton, who is the deputy commander of the army, leaned back in his chair with a serious look. Although we are not directly hostile to him now, the Enoch family and the Olivindi family are both one of the four major families in the Empire. When they can no longer hold on, they will most likely ask for help from the Olivindi family. If this continues, we will eventually face each other. His Majesty Alk has done me a favor, but if he wants to destroy the Enoch family for revenge, we better think about what to do when he really becomes hostile in the future. But he is a 9th level prophet, and everyone knows the methods of the prophet. Even if His Majesty Alk is not afraid, we can't fight him. At the side of the round table, Landon's sister Leah couldn't help but speak. I'm afraid we can only rely on His Majesty Alk to make the decision. Whether it's war or peace, we just have to wait for His Majesty's decision. Finally, Alyssa finalized the tone of the matter. On the other side, in the banquet hall of Count Baraska's castle in the eastern part of Carlis province, another discussion on how to deal with Ambus was also going on. What did His Majesty Marquis Barochi and the Glory Alliance say? Retreat our defenses, and stop all actions against the Olivindi family. Damn it, is there really nothing we can do? Count Baraska, with his messy ginger red hair and an open beard, sat at the table, staring at the people around him, and punched the table with his sturdy arms. Everyone was not surprised by his reaction. After all, he was once a vassal of the Olivindi family, but he betrayed his former master at the first moment of the turmoil. Now that the Olivindi family is about to rise again, the other party will definitely be in a state of panic. Can we make some kind of plan to lure out his real body and kill him? Use conspiracy to deal with a 9th level prophet? Are you sure? Listening to Count Baraska's words, Count Moore next to him raised his eyebrows and looked at him a little confused. Well said, then it will be up to Lord Baraska to arrange this plan. Lord Baraska, your opinion is great. We need such a good plan. The other people present also sneered, but at the same time, they also exchanged glances with each other in private. They were all people who had previously taken advantage of the Olivindi family. The news that Ambus became a 9th level prophet was a thunderbolt to everyone. They had to come up with a solution as soon as possible, otherwise they would be liquidated sooner or later. He is only a newly promoted 9th level prophet after all, not a 9th level stargazer, and he doesn't have the cooperation of the floating city. We have the support of the Marquis behind us, so we are not powerless to resist. Faced with the sarcastic remarks of the crowd, Baraska's face turned red, but he still argued with a somewhat unconvinced look. Okay, what Lord Baraska said makes sense. At this time, a slender figure sitting in the corner of the banquet hall, wearing a long blue velvet cloak, who had been silent before, suddenly spoke up and agreed with Count Baraska. Lord Lamela. Seeing this figure speaking, the rest of the people present saluted him. Although Count Lamela was equal to them in status, he was directly under Marquis Polochi. Marquis Polochi's power was growing rapidly in the empire, and he was no longer comparable. Don't be too afraid. After all, we are also the current nobles of the empire, and are protected by the royal family. If the other party really takes action personally, the royal guardians will definitely stand on our side. Even if he is a 9th level prophet, he cannot go against the power of the entire imperial royal family. Looking at the nobles around him, Count Lamera spoke calmly. Of course, everyone knows the methods of the prophet. We must unite now, and never give them the opportunity to defeat each other. Mr. Lamera is right. I agree with Mr. Lamera. Now we must stabilize ourselves so that we can maximize our own interests. Hearing this, the other nobles nodded one after another, and Count Moore even stepped forward to support Lamera's words. Well, now that everyone is here, I have something to say to you. Looking coldly at the nobles, who were vaguely led by Lamera, Count Baraska suddenly stood up and clapped his hands. I wonder if Mr. Baraska has any advice? Looking at Count Baraska with a half smile, Count Moore raised his glass to signal. Advice? Looking at the people with different expressions, Baraska's hairy face suddenly showed a crazy smile. Everyone, I say hello to you on behalf of His Majesty Anvis. Chapter 886 The Crowning of the Duke. What? Are you crazy? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the people in the audience suddenly changed. Count Moore was so shocked that he smashed his wine glass on the spot and pointed his sword at Baraska, who was sitting in the main seat. Baraska, you betrayed us? Count Lamera's expression also turned cold. He didn't expect this guy to betray so quickly. You are so stupid. With what you did before, even if you betray now, with the style of the Olivendi family, do you think they will let you go afterwards? Hee, Lord Lamela, don't worry about that. Breathing heavily, Count Baraska stared at everyone. It was as if substantial magic power enveloped his fists, and the terrifying pressure caused the space around his fists to distort slightly. Last night, His Majesty Anvis found me and promised that as long as I gathered you together and killed you, he would let me go. For this reason, I have already prepared magic binding and space blocking arrays for you in advance, and added the magic black crystal mushroom poison that I have treasured for hundreds of years, and is specifically targeted at magic operation to the wine, food and incense. After such a long time, I guess it's hard for you to use your magic now? Hearing this, everyone hurriedly used their magic, but the magic in their bodies that was originally at their fingertips now felt strangely obscure and extremely difficult to mobilize. This is the only bottle of finished product made by the 8th level alchemist Callaway hundreds of years ago. The raw material, the MOBA black crystal mushroom, is now extinct. I think it is enough to use it on you today. Seeing that the overall situation was settled, Count Baraska laughed. You traitor! If you do something like this, Marquis Polak will not let you go. Although he was horrified and angry, Count Lamera still glared at Baraska coldly. Marquis Polak? Ha ha ha. Hearing Count Lamera's words, Count Baraska stared at him with bloodshot eyes, and suddenly laughed wildly. He had previously openly conspired with the alien god cult to attack the important place of the Olivendi family. Now he is probably in danger. His Majesty Anvis has gone to deal with him personally. As for everyone present, it is not necessary for His Majesty to personally take action to deal with you. The next moment, a bloody massacre took place in the banquet hall. Count Baraska was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, wantonly killing the nobles, who were poisoned and trapped in the hall by the binding array. In front of the Earl's castle, a 9th level royal guardian, who had already arrived, stopped in midair, as if facing a great enemy, and confronted a young figure standing quietly in front of the castle gate. Please go back, sir. We are only dealing with some internal affairs of the Olivendi family here. Looking at the royal guardian standing still, Anvis smiled and touched his chest. His thin figure seemed like a cliff. Looking at the direction of the castle banquet hall with regret, which only had a breath of life left, the royal guardian looked at Anvis deeply, and then teleported away. A few days later, the news of Marquis Barocci's accidental death spread throughout the Gloria Empire. Afterwards, Gray, the head of the 3 royal guardians, went to the Olivendi family in person and left again after a secret meeting unknown to the outside world. Afterwards, The royal family issued a notice that half of the property and territory left by Marquis Polochi were assigned to the Olivindi family to compensate for the losses caused previously. At the same time, Ambus publicly entered the imperial palace and officially took over as the new Duke of Carlos in the presence of everyone. As Gloria III was currently missing, many princes and princesses attended and witnessed the canonization of Grey, the head of the 3 royal guardians. As the resistance forces in the Carlos province were eliminated, the situation in the Gloria Empire suddenly changed. Before Ambus returned, the 4 major families of the empire were already in a precarious situation. The Aslade family, which was once the strongest and backed by Dragon Island, now has only 1/10 of its territory left compared to its heyday. Dragon Island is also overwhelmed by the troubles of the Titans, and is unable to provide support. The Enoch family is gradually showing signs of defeat under the attack of the newly rising Marquis of Alk. With the help of the Son of Destiny, Lanton, and the backing of the Royal Guardians, since returning from the life-forbidden zone, the first of the 3 dangerous places on the continent a few years ago, Marquis Alk began to frantically retaliate against the Enoch family who had plotted against him. The core city of Enoch family, Magnum, has experienced many wars. The famous holy land of spellcasters in the Empire, the Forest of Thousand Towers, was nearly half destroyed in the war, and even one of the 9th-level ultimate guardians of the Enoch family fell. The current situation of the Alfred family and the Olivindi family is slightly better, but not much better. After Silver Gull City was attacked by the alien god sect a few years ago, and Fiona was kidnapped by the Ring of Truth, the only remaining 9th-level peak family guardian of the Olivindi family, the Kingdom of Silence after Siddles was injured, the situation of the Olivindi family went from bad to worse. The new nobles, the rebels and other forces are exerting their strength, constantly encroaching on the territories of the 2 families, and many foreign powers are also secretly planting people in an attempt to get a piece of the pie. But as the news that Avis became a 9th-level prophet and forcefully cleaned up all the hands that reached into the province of Carlos spread, the situation in which the 4 major families of the empire were pushed down by the crowd suddenly became a little confusing. The deterrent power of the 9th-level prophet is huge. The status of the Continental Magic Council can stand on par with the other 3 major countries on the Yar continent. The existence of the Stargazers plays a pivotal role in this. As long as Avis's body does not show up, other 9th-level masters will not dare to attack the Olivindi family at will. Due to the tacit understanding that the 4 major families of the empire once had to work together to deal with foreign enemies, the originally continuous war suddenly stopped temporarily. Many people wanted to see how Avis would treat the other 3 major families. At this moment, Avis, who was the focus of attention from the outside world, had already driven the floating city into the deep dream world. He actually didn't care much about the situation of the other 3 major families. The Olivindi family was able to turn the crisis into safety this time, all because of his existence. As long as he is alive, the Olivindi family will not have any problems. As for the Alfred family, considering that it is his mother's family, he also spent some time to make arrangements and showed his attitude, which was enough to allow the Alfred family to successfully survive this crisis. But Ambus was too lazy to ask about the other 2 major families, and just asked Duke Carrot to help him deal with it. Chapter 887, Journey to the Dream World. After all, the Aslade family and the Enoch family were not very peaceful at the beginning, which led to today's trouble. He didn't want to get involved at all. Besides, the Empire's affairs were not worth mentioning compared to the upcoming Dark Doomsday, and it was not worth spending too much time on it. Avis still had no idea how to deal with the Dark Doomsday. The information he knew at present was that because the Unival dream left by the High Elves divided part of the world rules, the power limit of the entire world was locked at the 9th level limit. If you want to break through, you must get out of the range of the Unival dream, or completely destroy it, so that the divided part of the world rules return to their original positions. But the dream world is the key to sealing the dark existence. If the Unival dream is destroyed, it is equivalent to directly releasing the sealed dark existence. As for breaking out of the Unival dream, it requires some means to penetrate the boundary of the Unival dream, that is, the sealing wall, which is almost impossible to do. Even if you do all this with all your heart and successfully break through to the legendary realm in the outside world, you can't return to the Yar continent again. Because once a legendary being enters the range of Unival's dream, they will be directly sucked into the gap between dreams and reality and sealed. All this information seems to indicate to Avis that the only way to escape is to completely escape from this world, like the Stargazer, and never return. However, the underworld is not a safe place. The previous experience of the gray fog in another world has shown how dangerous the underworld outside the Zenith Wall is. If you escape without knowing the dangers of the outside world, the hope of survival is also slim. In the control room of the floating city, Avis held the dark gold scepter and controlled the tower spirit to sink deeper into the dream world. He was going to the dream world to find something. Your Majesty Avis, where are you taking me? On the other side of the control room, Emily was holding an ancient brass wine lamp with a flame like a dark blue crystal, shivering beside Avis, with a look of confusion that had not completely dissipated. She had just completed the dream world leap and broke through to the 5th level dream mage, and then found herself here. Don't worry, I just need your help to find something here. And Wazy glanced at her with a kind smile. As the person chosen by the Nightmare Lantern, only with her help can he find out the Nightmare Lantern itself, which is the only replica that has some connection with the Dead Sea Lantern, and use it as a medium to obtain the whereabouts of the real epic wonder Dead Sea Lantern. The Dead Sea Lantern, also known as the Underworld Lantern, has a background legend. The nameless king relied on the light of the lantern to cross the endless underworld sea and return safely from the life-forbidden zone, which represents its strongest function. Even in the endless sea of darkness, it can point the holder in the right direction. When he learned that the dark existence was inevitably coming, Avis had to make the worst plan in advance. The Stargazer also knew about Emily and the Dead Sea Lantern, but he didn't need it very much. As a sign of sincerity to maintain non-aggression between him and Avis, he took the initiative to give up the hidden hand he had arranged on Emily. What are you taking? Although she was still a little scared, Emily couldn't help but ask curiously because she was familiar with Avis. We are almost there, you will know soon. After looking at the current location of the floating city in the tower spirit and realizing that they had reached the inverted layer at the bottom of the deep dream world, Avis turned around and slightly opened his right hand with a white glove in front of Emily. A virtual full-length mirror appeared in front of her out of thin air, reflecting Emily's confused little face, and after a few seconds, this confusion turned into doubt. As Emily watched, the reflection in the mirror suddenly smiled at her, then moved, walked slowly forward and walked out of the mirror, standing beside her like her twin. The appearance, demeanor, and clothing of the mirror image were exactly the same as hers, and she even held an old wind lantern with a faint blue flame in her hand, but the power it exuded was completely unpredictable to her. Don't be surprised, she came from you. I just temporarily manifested the fate projection of your 9th level state. Aside, Avis explained to her what happened, but the content made the girl tremble even more. Her 9th level mirror image can be created with just a wave of his hand, so terrifying. After manifesting the 9th order Emily's fate projection, Avis soon felt a faint call from the invisible. Following this feeling, Avis controlled the mirror image to raise the simple brass lantern in his hand. The blue crystal-like wick flame suddenly lit up, and a certain concept that had been lingering here for a long time was attracted by the wonderful brilliance of this flame and gradually descended on it. Soon, the lantern in the mirror image Emily's hand began to change gradually. The originally bright brass color gradually dimmed and turned into a deep black silver. The texture of the wick flame also gradually became clear and solid, and finally even approached the materialized crystal. Your Majesty Avis. Looking at the strange oil lamp in the mirror, Emily instinctively felt as if something precious had suddenly left her, and she couldn't help but call out in a low voice. Don't worry, I won't steal your things. I just borrow them temporarily and return them to you later. Looking at Emily's aggrieved look, Avis smiled at her, then took the materialized nightmare lantern from the mirror, closed his eyes, and started the fate tracing. After a moment, Avis suddenly opened his eyes. An invisible traction line flashed in his vision of destiny, pointing to the bottom of the deep dream world, which was deeper than the inversion layer. Without much hesitation, following the direction of the line, Avis controlled the floating city to dive all the way down. During this period, the light emitted by the floating city dispelled most of the dream creatures, but it also had to carefully avoid the 2 huge dream creatures with extremely terrifying auras, as well as some ancient gods with ancient and strange auras. As time went by, the depth of the floating city had almost reached an unprecedented unknown area. The bizarre dream world that once floated around the floating city was now gradually surrounded by broken dream world fragments, filled with twisted despair, and strange and deep darkness. This is the bottom of the real dream world, and further, it is the gap with the ancient dark existence. At this depth, even Avis couldn't help but secretly sweat, and the direction of the guiding line finally stopped going down, but turned to another direction. Finally, following the instructions, the floating city arrived in front of an extremely large dream world fragment. Unlike most other small fragments, the scale of this fragment is even comparable to some small dream worlds seen before. As the floating city sank into the fragment world, what came into Avis's sight was an endless and silent black ocean. There was no breath of life here, no seabirds, no fish, and even no wind. The whole world was shrouded in a quiet and lifeless atmosphere, like a tomb. Here, the loudest sound that Avis could hear was his own heartbeat. The direction indicated by the line was at the end of the ocean, on a small island made of black gravel. From this location, a breathtaking blue glow could be seen emanating from the center of the island. As the floating city floated above the island, Avis landed from the floating city, and the soles of his shoes stepped on the black sand, making a slight rustling sound, breaking the silence that seemed to have remained unchanged for ages. In the center of the black sand island, a human skeleton with a pure silver-white body and a crown on its head sat on a large rock. Between the skeleton's dry and intertwined fingers, it held an ancient dark silver lantern. The fascinating blue light was emitted from this lantern. And on the black sand beach in front of this strange skeleton, several lines of light and beautiful handwriting appeared in Avis' eyes after a long time. In the 387th year of the glorious calendar, the chaos giant serpent Leontani crossed the underworld and wanted to penetrate the barrier between the dream world and the real world. If it succeeds, darkness will come in an instant, and the world will be devastated. I will leave this broken body and lure it to the bottom of the dream world, and finally trap it and kill it here. Later generations, there is no need to be afraid. Legends are not invincible. Gloria Augustine. Chapter 888. The Emperor kills the giant snake. Gloria Augustine? Seeing the signature at the bottom of these few lines of messages, Avis's eyes fixed. He was very familiar with this name. It was the real name of Emperor Gloria, whose whereabouts were unknown in the historical records. Turning his eyes to the silver skeleton holding the lantern quietly, Avis bowed to it seriously. If this skeleton was the final whereabouts of the missing Emperor Gloria, then the other party's actions were enough to make him admire. In order to protect the world, he sacrificed himself and died together with a terrifying existence that crossed the underworld. However, Avis also had a question at the same time. How did Emperor Gloria do all this? The giant snake Leontange is undoubtedly a legendary existence, but as long as Emperor Gloria is still in this world, his strength theoretically cannot break through the 9th level. Please forgive my impoliteness, Your Majesty. Looking at the silent skeleton and the quietly shining dark silver lantern, Avis finally walked forward and gently placed his hand on the skeleton. A huge prophecy ritual array was unfolded on the entire black sand island with Avis and the silver skeleton as the center. Although the hope was very slim, he still wanted to try to see if he could use this skeleton as a medium to trace the fate and peek into the past, when Emperor Gloria fought against the giant serpent of the underworld. What Avis was most confused about now was how to truly eliminate the existence above the legendary level. This experience of killing legends was very important to him. Avis did not think that the prophecy given to him by the High Elf Prophet Hill was aimless. Perhaps he really had some power that he did not know about, but could eliminate those dark existences. As the prophecy spell continued to trace back, Avis seemed to be wandering, led by the skeleton in front of him, running through the long river of time, peeping into the more distant upstream. Gradually, a hazy picture appeared in front of Avis. Between the dim sky and earth, blood-red lightning occasionally broke through the night sky, and the boundless darkness and chaotic ocean rolled and surged in all directions, sweeping towards a tiny figure in the center. However, a little blue light always hung high in front of the figure's head like a star, and no matter how the darkness swept, it could never be extinguished. Under the shining light, the darkness in front of the figure was broken layer by layer. Finally, as the last layer of darkness dissipated, a huge blood-red eye with a diamond-shaped pupil and a size as big as a hill, which was almost disproportionate to the size of the figure, appeared in front of the figure. But the moment this giant eye appeared, the picture in Avis's perception was like a mirror falling to the ground, and it instantly became fragmented. And Avis, who was standing in the same place, turned pale at this moment, and the hand on the skeleton was bounced away as if struck by lightning, and his breath instantly became disordered. Although he already knew that he would not be able to see the key parts, when the result was really in front of him, Avis still felt a little regretful. As the ceremony ended, the skeleton turned into a pile of silver dust under some invisible huge backlash force, and the dark silver Dead Sea Lantern and the crown lost their support and fell to the ground. But in the pool of sand, the dusty crown suddenly attracted Avis's attention. As if some conditions had been met, a small star-shaped gem on the crown suddenly emitted light, projecting a thumb-sized light blue ball that floated in the air like a ghost. "How long has it been? Finally, someone has arrived here." A hoarse female voice came out from the light ball, breaking the eternal silence on the black beach. "This message is the last thing I can leave for this world and for mankind. The one who can reach here and trigger this message must be a fellow traveler who is above the 9th level and has touched the legendary barrier. The latecomers, Please remember one thing: when facing the legendary existence from outside the Nether Sea, do not try to confront it head-on. The essence of the legendary existence is the real rule life, which is different from the essence of our life form. Due to the limitations of this world, we cannot defeat any legend, even if it is extremely weak, in a head-on battle with our own strength. However, despite this, we don't need to be too afraid when facing them. In ancient times, weak individuals could use fire to hunt beasts that were far stronger than humans. Now, facing the dark existence that has crossed the underworld, the only flames we can use are the different rules from them, and the power of other great existences. I moved the battlefield away from the main material world, using myself as bait to guide the great existence Star Cocoon in the Sea of Origin to descend, clashing with its existence, and wearing away its legendary essence. After it fell into an extremely weak state, I illuminated and locked its body with the light of the Dead Sea Lantern, and then blew up on my own path, causing a collision with the unique rules in the deep dream world. For beings below the legendary level, the collision of different rules will not produce any impact that they can perceive. But for rule creatures above legendary level, and in an extremely weak state, the body is washed by the rule ripples generated by the collision of rules, and its end is like snow exposed to the sun. Unfortunately, this method is too costly, and when the only medium related to Star Cocoon is consumed by me, this method can no longer be used a second time. This message saved in the Star Dream Diamond is the last thing I can do for this world. Later generations, don't be discouraged. The method is only the appearance, the concept is the foundation. As the voice ended, the star-shaped gem on the crown dimmed again, and the air on the island returned to silence. Thank you for your advice. After paying respect to the crown again, Anvis took the Dead Sea Lantern from the silver ashes and left silently, leaving the crown and ashes in this world. The secret revealed by Emperor Gloria was a great inspiration to him. The information that the legendary existence is a pure rule creature. Anvis knew very well that the process of breaking through the legend of the 9th level is actually the process of gradually turning its own body into a rule. However, Avis had not known before that the rule ripples caused by the collision of different rules could completely wipe out legendary existences. There was no intelligence record of this in the entire Yar continent. And Avis also had some understanding of the great beings in the Sea of Origin. Through the mysterious model in the spiritual space, he had once peeked at a strange butterfly living in the Sea of Origin from a distance that he did not know how far away. Chapter 889 God does not exist. As the Star Cocoon mentioned by Emperor Gloria, there seems to be more than one such existence in the Sea of Origin, and their power level has reached a height that Anvis cannot understand. Borrowing their power is undoubtedly an extremely dangerous thing. Emperor Gloria is buried here, which is probably related to the previous borrowing of Star Cocoon power. Luckily, the dark existences he has to deal with now have been trapped in the gap between dreams and reality for countless thousands of years. He didn't need to think about how to consume their power, he just needed to try to kill them. Silently returning to the floating city, Avis was thinking about how to achieve the rule collision mentioned by the great emperor, while controlling the floating city to return to the main material world, and at the same time sending Emily, who was full of questions but dared not speak, back to her original place. However, as the floating city returned to the main material world, Avis suddenly received an unexpected message. The person who sent this message was Sun Yanel, who had been planted with a twisted seed by Avis on the island, and had now broken through the 9th level, and officially promoted to the 8th Archbishop of the Holy Light Church. The Pope is preparing some secret plan, even you can't be sure of the specific content? After listening to Yanel's message, Avis was slightly stunned. When his own strength reached the ceiling of this world, Avis didn't care about the Holy Light Church as much as before. As the top combat power in the world, the Olivendi family's previous dilemma has been broken. His existence and the power in his hands are like a high wall. Even the long-standing tide of the times has to bow down to him. Under his intimidation, no one would go to such trouble to attack his closest family members. Moreover, Fiona, who returned with him, also broke through the 9th level. At this moment, as the new family guardian in secret, she did not publicize it to the outside world, waiting to give the enemy a surprise when necessary. The only thing that can threaten Anvis at the moment is the coming doomsday, and the dark beings that crossed the Sea of Hades in ancient times. However, now, the Pope's private actions seem to be very big, to the extent that Yanel finds it strange. Without hesitation, Anvis immediately arranged a prophecy ritual and predicted the recent actions of Pope Saint Messia III and the Holy Light Church. But the result of the prophecy spell feedback made Anvis frown. The fate of the Pope and the Holy Light Church was completely shrouded in fog, and no clues could be found. Although all major forces would have corresponding countermeasures against the prophecy school spells, the fact that he, a 9th level prophet, could not detect any information at all showed that the other party was completely maintaining the fake cover-up at all costs. With such a force, what exactly does the other party want to cover up? Investigate the Pope's actions, and notify me immediately if there is any news. After giving orders to Yanel, Ambus ended the communication. Holy City of Gonsaverin, First Holy Light Church. Your Holiness, where are you taking me? Following closely behind Pope Saint Messia III, Yanel looked at the corridors that continued to go down around him, with a puzzled look on his face. It was the first time for him to step into the secret door behind the First Holy Light Church. In the past, this was an absolute forbidden area of the Holy Light Church, and only the current Pope was qualified to enter it. We don't have much time. The Pope answered indifferently, slightly tilting his head, and glanced at Yanel with his eyes shining with a faint white holy light, causing the latter to lower his eyes. I know you have many doubts in your heart. Don't be impatient. You will understand everything when we reach the final destination. Yes. Hearing this, Yanel did not ask anything more. In this silent atmosphere, the two continued to move forward, and the surrounding walls became darker as they moved forward, and finally became like the deep night. At some point, dots of holy starlight shone from the depths of the dark night-like wall, and faint hymns surrounded the two of them, as if they were stepping into the stars of the kingdom of God. Finally, at the end of the corridor, the ancient and dark stone door that seemed to be carved on the rock wall appeared in front of the two of them. As the two of them arrived in front of the stone door, the holy emblem of divine grace and light worn on the Pope's chest, which symbolized the Pope's identity, lit up, and the circular holy emblem of light in the center of the stone door also responded and shone. A brilliant crack slowly opened, and the stone door split into two from the center. Pure holy white light poured out from the crack of the door, shining on the faces of the two. Behind the stone door, the vast natural underground cave, and the huge holy white light crystal stone in the center of the cave, which was as big as a hill, came into the eyes of the Pope and Yanel. Your Majesty, what is this? Looking at the scene in front of him, Yanel unconsciously took 2 steps forward, staring blankly at the huge light crystal stone in front of him that was flowing with an incredible power of faith, and the strange light in the center of the light crystal stone that was shining like breathing. This is God. The Pope's first word startled Yanel so much that he almost jumped up. What? Looking at Saint Messiah III in disbelief, Yanel suddenly felt a vague sense of faith collapse. Then the Lord we pray to. Yanel, I have said that time is running out. As you can see, this is what we believe in and pray to now. Don't worry too much. Although he is not a god at the moment, he can still respond to people's prayers. To the majority of believers, he is no different from God. The Pope interrupted Yanel's words without hesitation. The coldness in his eyes emitting holy white light made Yanel silent again. I brought you here for this reason, for the true coming of our Lord. Looking at the huge light crystal in the center of the cave, the Pope's words surprised Yanel again. The final judgment is coming. Without the Lord's glory, the whole world will sink into endless darkness forever. As the only perfect human body of the Saint Plan, I know you have many questions. Now, I give you this opportunity to ask all the questions that confuse you. Has the God we believe in been like this from the beginning? Xingbai's eyes stared at the Pope, and Yanel spoke word by word. God has been like this from the beginning. Looking at Yanel indifferently, the young Pope nodded. There is no God, nor is there any kingdom of God. From the beginning to the end, it is only people's own beliefs that respond to people's prayers. The source of our sacred power is the same. Chapter 890 God-Making. As the Pope finished speaking, Yanel's face suddenly turned pale, and the aura around him became violently disordered. The faint holy light that lingered around him suddenly went out completely. In the depths of his heart, something that had been constant and unchanging suddenly had a huge crack. A trace of blood with a white holy light flowed from the corner of his mouth, staining his fingers that were raised in a daze. Against the backdrop of his pale skin, it looked particularly shocking. Facing this scene, the Pope just calmly watched the struggling Yanel, his eyes filled with white holy light, and some unknown meaning surged, as if he was waiting for something. Gradually, as time passed, Yanel's eyes slowly calmed down, and a ray of determination rose from the depths of his eyes again. The pale white holy light reappeared from his body, seemingly no different from before, but it seemed to have some essential difference. How do you feel at this moment? Seeing this change, the Pope's eyes suddenly flashed with expectation. There is no difference. With a light breath, Yanel looked at his hands and answered in a low voice. Very good, very good. Hearing this, Saint Messia III finally showed a look of relief on his face. Although you have been shocked by the truth, it has not touched the root of your faith. Your true faith is not God, but light. Even if this light crystal disappears now, you will not be affected too much, because faith always exists. And this is the most critical requirement to become the Pope. Become the Pope? Hearing the Pope's words, Yanel was shocked again. Your Majesty, what do you mean? Don't worry, in our position, there are many secrets that we have to know. Even if we don't want to know, everything is bound to happen. Turning around and looking at the huge light crystal stone in the center of the cave, the Pope spoke in a low voice. God does not exist. This is a secret that only the Pope is qualified to know. There is no God, nor is there any kingdom of God. What responds to people's prayers from beginning to end is nothing but people's own faith. I admit that he is very powerful, extraordinary powerful. But he is not a god after all, just a cold product of alchemy, a container for the power of faith. Although some special changes have occurred due to the infiltration of endless power of faith, it is just a simple improvement of carrying capacity and feedback efficiency. The gap between becoming a god is like the distance between the sky and the earth. As he said this, the Pope turned around again and stared at Yanel. But you know, Yanel, it shouldn't be like this. There is always something restricting it. According to the fragmentary records of ancient times, the gods really existed at that time. The existence of the power of faith also proves this from the side. The power of faith he collected should have reached the limit of deification long ago. But what happened after that? Why did the gods disappear? Why can't the gods appear again? Where did the gods go? Your Holiness. Looking at the somewhat excited Pope, Yanel was a little frightened and couldn't help but try to end the topic. So, after becoming the Pope, whenever I had free time, I looked up ancient documents and tried to find clues related to that lost history. However, the Pope completely ignored Yanel's interruption. Finally, on a stone tablet handed down from the ancient Golden Age, I found some details about all this. It was a war beyond anyone's imagination, a war between the High Elves and the Nameless Existence, the final battle that ended the entire ancient Golden Age. We don't know the cause and process of the war, but in the history after that war, there is no trace of gods anymore. That war changed the basic rules of this world, and there is no way forward. The High Elves exchanged the future of all the creatures in the world for the end of that war, yes, just an end. The ancient final war has never ended, but has been extended indefinitely. It is still going on, in the past, now, and in the future for who knows how many years. Your Holiness, why are you telling me this? Hearing this, Yanel finally couldn't help but ask a question. Didn't I say that the day of final judgment is coming, and without the Lord's glory, the whole world will be forever sunk into endless darkness? With a cold smile, the Pope said a piece of information that was like a bolt from the blue. Half a month ago, God gave me a new revelation. The dark beings that were lost in the ancient final war have now relocked the coordinates of the main material world. Now, the darkness of the mythological era is about to come again, and people need a god who can protect the world. If the rules are missing, then make them up again. If the gods are not here, then create a god that belongs to us. Hearing this, Yanel finally widened his eyes in shock. Man-made gods, at this time and place, in the most sacred place of the Holy Light Church, the holy words spoken by Pope Saint Messiah III are even more blasphemous and treasonous than the most evil and twisted pagans. Don't look at me like that, Yanel. Having already expected Yanel's reaction, Saint Messiah III walked up to Yanel and spoke in a low voice. In this cold world, no god will pity all living beings. The only ones who will pity us are always ourselves, only ourselves. But this is blasphemy. Looking at the Pope's eyes flashing with a faint holy light, Yanel murmured, "Yes, this is blasphemy." With a cold smile on his face, Saint Messiah III nodded, with a little pity in his eyes. "But it is also saving the world." Looking at the Pope in front of him, Yanel opened his mouth, and finally just lowered his head gently. "So, Your Holiness, what do you need me to do?" "Don't be afraid, Yanel. Do you know, there is actually no God in this world, but because people need God, God appears. The true meaning of the Bible is actually to praise the greatness of man." Facing the silent Yanel, the Pope's tone softened. "Do you remember the first chapter of the Bible? The ancient foreign objects brought twisted darkness, and the darkness devoured the people. People called for God in despair, so God came with supreme glory and exiled the darkness and foreign objects. From the beginning to the end, God came from people. We don't worship idols because God exists in everyone's heart. It is people who need light, so there is light in this world." Chapter 891 Noon has arrived. God-making plan? In the Sky City, after hearing the message sent by Yanel again, Anvis was also shocked by the Pope's huge ambition. Yes, His Holiness the Pope is going to use the power of faith accumulated by the Holy Light Church for countless years to transform the entire territory of the Holy Messiah Empire into Holy Land and complete the missing world rules. When the rules of the world are completed, the originally incomplete demigod will be able to be promoted to a true god. With the help of the distortion seed, Yenel quickly revealed the information he knew to Anvis. The power of faith is a very magical power. It has a characteristic of omnipotence, which is very close to the specific wishing technique in the mysterious magic, and the result of the wish depends entirely on the beliefs of the believers. Therefore, if we can communicate with the majority of believers, mobilize the power of faith, and cooperate with specific secret rituals, these three combined can launch the largest scale specific wishing technique in history. I am the perfect human body of the Saint Plan. His Holiness the Pope hopes that I can preside over the operation of the Holy Body Ritual, one of the three rituals of Holy Soil, Holy Body, and Holy Spirit, at the critical moment. The power of faith, to make up for the rules of the world? Listening to Yenel's message, Avis suddenly seemed to grasp something vaguely. The incomplete rules of the main material world are due to the fact that the High Elves divided the world rules, and used them to create the dream world to seal the dark beings, and this part of the world rules has never disappeared. If one day in the future, the Unable Dream ceremony is ended, the original part of the world rules will still leave the collapsed dream world and return to the real world. However, if before that, Saint Messiah III first fills in the missing part of the rules, then what will happen when the original rules return? So, when is the specific date of the ceremony? After thinking for a moment, Amwise asked again. On the first day of this year's Divine Grace Festival, His Holiness the Pope is going to hold a special grand ceremony to celebrate with all believers in the Empire. The ceremony begins at the same time as this ceremony. Hearing Avis's question, Yenel answered, I understand. When the ceremony is officially launched, notify me immediately. The Grace Festival of the Holy Light Church lasts for 3 days, and the first day of the Grace Festival is the first day of the middle month of the year. After ending the communication with Yenel, Avis quickly predicted the situation on the day of the Grace Festival. The feedback from the prophecy spell was still fruitless, but he suddenly felt a little uneasy in his heart. On that day, it seemed that something was going to happen. In the 2470th year of the glorious calendar, on the first day of the middle month, the day of divine grace. For some reason, the sky today was a little strange. A layer of strange transparent distorted ripples permeated the sky. When standing on the ground and looking up at the sky, the blue sky and white clouds all had a distorted texture similar to that of an oil painting. The coverage of this transparent ripple was even more astonishing. From the southernmost Blackwater port on the Yar continent to the northernmost Evernight icefield, everywhere was covered by this distorted ripple. Some professionals tried to fly up to the sky to check, but they couldn't figure out what was going on. They could only find that it was a space distortion phenomenon of unknown cause. However, the civilians of the Saint Messiah Empire were only surprised by this strange celestial phenomenon, and then put it behind their minds. Because today is the big day for the Holy Light Church to hold the Divine Grace Festival. Moreover, this year is different from previous years. Pope Saint Messiah III announced that during this year's celebration, he will start a special sermon in the First Holy Light Church for all devout believers. At that time, all the Holy Light Churches in the Empire will broadcast the sermon in real time, and all believers can go to the local Holy Light Church to watch the ceremony. Most of the civilians in the Saint Mercia Empire are believers of the Holy Light Church. After hearing the news, people from all over the Empire took to the streets and gathered in front of the local church to listen to the teachings of His Holiness the Pope. A large number of players, who came here to admire the reputation, watched all this in amazement, and many of them started live broadcasts, so that other players, who were not in the Saint Mercia Empire, could also see this scene. At this time, with countless large and small Holy Light Churches throughout the Empire as the center, a large number of clergymen were distributed around in specific positions, working together to maintain the operation of the huge Holy Power Array. This was not only to broadcast the scene when the Pope preached, but also to defend against possible foreign enemies. A huge illusory magic projection appeared in the air, broadcasting live the scene in the center of the holy city of Gonsabalin, the First Holy Light Church. In front of the low and simple white stone altar that enshrined the Holy Grail, Saint Messiah III bowed his head and stood solemnly facing the holy white light in the Holy Grail. All the bishops and high-ranking clergymen were arranged behind him according to their positions, waiting for a certain moment to come. Compared with the solemn and magnificent Cathedral of the Holy Chant in the city of Holy Chant, and the Cathedral of Grace in Pavilion, the interior furnishings here could not be simpler, but everyone's expression was extremely solemn, without any dissatisfaction. This was because this was the place where the first Pope of the Holy Light Church, Saint Messiah, first preached the doctrine to the world, and it was also the most sacred place of the Holy Light Church. In this low building, all the popes and bishops of all generations have been baptized and crowned here. At this time, Saint Messiah III changed into a solemn platinum dress that he would only wear on special festivals, holding the papal scepter and wearing a pure white sacred triple crown. The pure light and ethereal hymns lingered around him, making him look like the Son of God descending to the world. As countless people waited, time passed little by little. As the dazzling sun reached the noon sky, the Pope, who had been silent like a statue, finally raised his head. The time has come. Turning around slowly, the young Pope looked at the clergy behind him, and at the countless believers who were watching this unprecedented sermon. Praise the Holy Light, praise Saint Messiah. Dear brothers and sisters, dear believers, at this moment, I am honored to be able to listen to the teachings of God with you. Half a month ago, I received an oracle. Here, I will share the content of this oracle with you with an extremely heavy and joyful heart. Listening to the Pope's words, several archbishops remained silent, but they were all confused. The Pope received the oracle, but why didn't he tell them the content of the oracle in advance this time? This oracle reveals the most important moment in the doctrine that we have been waiting for a long time. At this point, the blonde young Pope was silent for a moment, and his eyes with pure white holy light swept over the bishops below, who suddenly thought of something and changed their expressions, and spoke again. Within this month, the day of final judgment is coming. The ancient darkness will once again cover this world, bringing endless despair and death to this world. As soon as these words came out, the whole world was shocked. Chapter 892. The ceremony begins. All the professionals who were watching this grand sermon were blown away, especially the high-level professionals who were terrified. If someone else said this, they would just laugh it off and regard it as madness. No one believed the ancient myths in the Holy Book. But now, the person who said this crazy sentence was the leader of the three major countries on the continent, the current Pope of the Holy Light Church, and Saint Messiah III, one of the strongest people in the world. Moreover, the other party said this in the First Holy Light Church, in front of a group of archbishops and hundreds of millions of believers watching the ceremony, and announced it to the world in the name of the oracle. As the Pope of the Holy Light Church, the other party would never lie in the name of God. Is the Judgment Day really true? Thinking of the strange and distorted celestial phenomena covering the entire continent in the sky today, the top leaders of many major forces became nervous. At this moment, the Pope's words were obviously not finished yet. They were ready to listen to what the Pope planned to do next, and then decide how to respond. In the Saint Mercia Empire, the believers who listened to the Pope's preaching fell silent for a moment, and everyone was shocked and speechless. Fear, resentment, sadness, joy. All kinds of different expressions appeared on people's faces, gathering into a microcosm of all living beings. However, in this complex ocean of emotions, the most common and profound expression is the regret that is difficult to conceal. Under the news that the day of judgment is about to come, people instinctively began to think about their past choices, and then painfully discovered that the things that they usually ignored and took for granted are the most precious. If they could go back to the past, they would definitely choose a different path from before, cherish every gathering with relatives and friends, or show more courage at critical moments to make up for those regrets. While the outside world was in an uproar, the Pope's sermon continued. This moment is a moment of hope and fear, and it is also the beginning of our new eternal life. When the final judgment comes, no one can escape. After experiencing the judgment, you may become God's people and enter the kingdom of God, gaining eternal peace and happiness, or you may be thrown into hell because of your sins, and the pain will never end. Knowing very well how much his words would arouse in the outside world, he was silent for a moment, waiting for his emotions to ferment, and then the Pope changed the subject. Don't be afraid, devout believers. In the time of our ancestors, darkness enveloped the earth. People called on God, and then God appeared. He did not let us encounter darkness, but saved us from the invasion of foreign objects, just because he heard people's requests. Now, although darkness has returned, we have practiced the precious body of God and faced the darkness in the mortal world with the glory of God. We are all on the road that must be taken. There are no surprises, no need to regret. The Pope's voice spread with great power, as if it was a warning to the world. Countless believers, who originally had more or less regretful faces, instantly felt the negative emotions in their hearts cleared, tears flowed in their eyes, and they had a deeper understanding and faith in the doctrine in their hearts. Under the glory of God, the day of judgment is not the end of the world, but an opportunity for us to end this world full of sin and create a new and better world. When we cleanse our sins and step into the kingdom of God, people's temperaments will become extremely noble, sins will be completely eliminated, mistakes will be made up, arrogance, greed, jealousy, rage, laziness, gluttony will no longer exist. At this moment, under the excited gaze of countless believers, the Pope's voice became passionate and fanatical. Now, devout believers, please pray for our tomorrow. Pray for God to bring his kingdom to the earth and drive darkness out of this world forever. By then, we will all be God's people. We will have eternal peace in the kingdom of God. Praise the holy light. Praise the holy light. As the Pope's words fell, many people watching the ceremony couldn't help but cry out excitedly. The mighty power of faith, like a mountain or an ocean, gathered and rose under the faith of countless devout believers, and some wonderful changes began to take place. Deep underground in the holy city of Gonsabalan, under the blessing of the sudden burst of faith of countless believers, the huge light crystal in the cave burst out with unprecedented strong brilliance. The endless power of faith accumulated over thousands of years was boiling at this moment, responding to the prayers of countless believers. The sacred breath began to radiate to the entire Saint Messia Empire, with the holy city of Gonsabalan as the center. Under the devout prayers of countless believers, Holy Land, one of the 3 holy rituals, was successfully completed. Seeing that the time was ripe, the Pope raised the scepter in his hand, and secretly issued an order to Yanel in the distance. The city of the chant, the cathedral of the chant. After receiving the secret order from the Pope, Yanel, who was quietly waiting in front of the central altar of the church, sighed. At this moment, the entire church was empty. All irrelevant personnel had left according to the Pope's instructions, and outside visitors were temporarily suspended. The ceremony has begun. After conveying the message of the ceremony to Anbis, Yanel walked around the central altar, and sat down in front of the most famous sacred organ in the Chant Cathedral, entering the state of a saint. This is the largest organ in the entire Yar continent. According to legend, on the day when the Chant Cathedral and this large organ were built, a real angel descended from nothingness and blessed it. Yanel could not play, nor did he need to. As the pure holy power flowed from his body into the piano keys, the brilliant holy light pattern started from his fingers, and climbed up along the countless pipes of the organ like vines. But at the same time, these vine-like holy light patterns also imprisoned him firmly in place, faintly connected to the entire church. The deep and powerful hymn sounded naturally, resonating with the architectural structure of the cathedral, and echoing over the entire city of hymns. Under the astonished gaze of countless believers waiting outside, the entire cathedral suddenly radiated pure holy light. A huge faceless angel phantom emerged from the void, gently embracing the entire church, like a loving mother embracing her children. The holy body of the 3 holy rituals was successfully activated. As the sacred aura of the holy city of Gonsabalan expanded to the city of holy songs, the huge angel phantom seemed to have gained some kind of huge supplement and became solid, and even the details of every feather on its wings behind it could be seen. At this moment, in the name of God, I call for faith, and the darkness will retreat. Sensing that the ritual was successfully launched as planned, Saint Messia III's eyes became firm. He had no way out, and could only go one way. Floating City, Orisian. Watching the live broadcast from the Saint Messia Empire, the Magic Council was silent. The news of the coming day of judgment was too horrifying. To translate it, it means that the end of the world is coming soon, and this news was endorsed by the Pope in the name of God, so the truthfulness was almost set in stone. The time has come, let's start. The head of the long table, the Stargazer, spoke in a low voice, breaking the silence in the room. Chapter 893 The Magic Council's Plan. Is this the only way? Leave this world completely? Hearing the words of the Stargazer, Ring of Space and Time Vernica remained silent, while Mystery Seeker Alvani spoke with difficulty. We have no choice, Alvani. You and I should know what those distortions in the sky mean. Looking at the 2 hesitant people, the Stargazer twisted his translucent gray spiral beard and spoke calmly. The barrier between the dream world and reality is being distorted by them. No one knows how long this distorted state can last. Maybe half a month, or maybe the next second, they will completely tear open the wall of the zenith and descend into this world again. If that moment really comes, we will have no hope of survival. I wonder if you have heard of the story of the Great Flood in the myths and legends of the Ill Kingdom Federation. As he spoke, the Stargazer's eyes swept across the other silent 8th and 9th level spellcasters sitting at the head of the long table. In the early days of humankind, there was an incomparable flood that swept the world, and everything was swallowed up by the flood. When all souls were in despair, a prophet came with a huge ship and rescued the first human beings and the ancestors of various animals on board. After the flood receded, they returned to land and reproduced. Now, we are the last ark of mankind. Of course, I don't force anyone to leave with us. If anyone wants to stay in this world now, they can ask now, and I will send him out of the floating city immediately." After this, the spellcasters looked at each other, but no one made any move. The Saint Messiah Empire. Is it really possible for them to successfully resist the Dark Doomsday? Finally, a 9th level spellcaster asked hesitantly. Resist the Dark Doomsday? Hearing this question, the Stargazer's wrinkled face twitched, and a strange smile appeared between his translucent gray beard. Unfortunately, the hope of success is zero. There is no possibility. What? Everyone was shocked when they heard the Stargazer's decisive judgment. Don't be surprised. Even Pope Saint Messiah III knows this. However, the Stargazer's next words stunned everyone again. No matter how powerful the Saint Messiah Empire and the Holy Light Church are, no matter how much faith the people have, they will only perish in the face of the dark beings that are about to descend. Even if the gods of the Holy Light Church rely on the Holy Land for defense, their divine power can only withstand 1 or 2 ancient dark beings that break through the boundary and descend, but no one knows how many dark beings are staring at this world. Moreover, once out of the rule range of this artificial Holy Land, the power of the gods will be greatly reduced. As more and more dark beings descend, the Holy Light Church will be extinguished by the endless darkness, like a candle. Then they are. You want to ask what Saint Messiah III wants to do, right? Facing a group of puzzled spellcasters, the Stargazer twisted his beard and said something earth-shattering. In fact, he has already told you what he is going to do. Do you remember what he just said? Enter the kingdom of God, become God's people, create a new and better world, and gain eternal peace and happiness. In short, he is also ready to leave this world, but he wants to use the power of faith to create a real kingdom of God in the world, so that the faith aggregate without self-consciousness under Gonsavalin can ascend to God in it. Then, with the power of the pan-conscious body after ascending to God, he can take the entire Holy Land of Saint Messiah Empire and leave Unival, leave this world, and drift in the endless sea of heaven. As the Stargazer finished speaking, the entire conference room fell silent. Everyone was shocked by the almost unimaginable and crazy goal of Saint Messiah III. Take the entire Saint Messiah Empire away? After a long time, someone finally murmured as if waking up from a dream. But his behavior is blasphemy. Another 9th level spellcaster noticed the blind spot. The Pope's actions were almost the same as those of the pagans, who fantasized about summoning the evil gods from outside the domain all day long. Perhaps the only difference was that the Pope could really do it successfully. Yes, but he will also become the greatest Pope in the history of the Holy Light Church. At the left seat at the head of the long table, Ring of Space and Time Vernica spoke in a low voice, her voice echoing in the empty conference hall like many voices of different ages overlapping. No one spoke to refute this evaluation. Since everyone is clear about the Pope's goal and has no doubts, then please listen to me. Looking at the reactions of the crowd, the Stargazer smiled slightly and spoke as expected. Our chance to leave this world is to rely on this new kingdom of God. When Saint Messiah III's plan succeeds, and the new gods break through the ceiling wall and take the entire Saint Messiah Empire away, we will follow closely behind and leave this world before the damage is healed. At this moment, as the expanding Holy Land completely covers the entire Saint Messiah Empire, all the ordinary professionals and players who are paying attention to this are stunned. Look, the earth is glowing. Seeing the land beneath their feet suddenly glow with pure white holy light, many people curiously picked up the soil to observe, but they couldn't see anything. For some reason, I feel a warm feeling on my body. Look at our status bar. We have a new holy soil status effect. The effect of sacred skills is increased by 300%, the experience required for the priest to upgrade is halved, and the maximum level cap of the priest is lifted? Will this state cover the entire Saint Messiah Empire's permanent territory? Fuck, awesome, upgrade now. After seeing the effect of the Holy Land buff, all the players were dumbfounded. Although the native professionals did not have a panel, they could clearly feel the improvement of their own status. In the holy city of Gonzavalin, as the Holy Land completely covered the entire Saint Messiah Empire, the blonde young pope looked at the shocked bishops and the millions of devout believers below, and was silent for a short time. The plan has been fully launched, and the 2 major ceremonies of holy soil and holy body have been successfully completed. Now, there is only the last step left, which is the final ceremony Holy Spirit presided over by him personally. However, before that, he still has some things to solve. Artificial Kingdom of God. Creating God. Your Holiness, you are now blaspheming God. Holy Inquisition Georgeson's face was livid, and the thorny sword wrapped in holy light had been pulled out and pointed at the face of the Pope. From now on, you are no longer our Pope, but a heretic. Behind him, Candia, the one who has been graced by God, Mark, the crown of thorns, and nearly half of the bishops among the 7 archbishops have entered a combat state. Several other archbishops also showed shock and regret, but did not take action directly, as if they wanted to wait for the Pope's explanation. Chapter 894 Holy Spirit. Blasphemy? The holy white eyes stared at the chief heretic judge Holy Inquisition Jorgeson, who was pointing his sword at him, and then glanced at the different expressions of the other archbishops. A trace of pity flashed across the face of Saint Messia III, and then it all turned into indifference. Everything I do will last forever. Nothing can be added or subtracted. The one who blasphemed is not me, but you. As he said this, the young Pope turned around, turned his back to the shocked and angry Jorgeson, loosened the scepter that symbolized the Pope, and then reached out to the pure holy cup on the altar that was filled with light. Enough. This is the end. Heretical blasphemy. Seeing that the Pope was still stubborn, holy judgment Jorgeson stabbed with his sword. The terrifying power of rules lingered on the sword, and it seemed to have established a certain fate with the Pope, just like the holy sword that pierced through the devil in myths and legends. This shocking scene was also presented in front of countless spectators. Many believers were shocked, and their originally devout prayers could not help but stop, and the continuous wave of faith power suddenly subsided. Facing Jorgeson's attack, the Pope did nothing and let him stab him in the back. Ding. But what no one expected was that when the sword tip touched the Pope's body, an extremely crisp sound like an angel's holy bell was heard. At the same time, the thorn sword in Jorgeson's hand seemed to have received some kind of divine punishment, and pieces from the tip to the body of the sword broke and shattered, turning into tiny crystal metal dust. What? The archbishops, who took action, were all stunned. Holy Inquisition Jorgeson did not hold back just now. How could the Pope be so powerful? On the other side, the Pope did not care about the actions of the bishops, but just picked up the Holy Grail on the altar, and then turned around again, facing the many archbishops, who were either angry or thoughtful, and also facing the countless believers who were watching the scene. Today, I will create the world again in the name of glory and origin. As he said this, the Pope raised the golden Holy Grail high, and then tilted it forward. The brilliant and pure light flowed out of the cup, along the Pope's arms, and gradually overflowed his body. At the same time, the entire First Holy Light Church seemed to echo it, emitting a soft and holy light. Enough. Stop him. Seeing this, Jorgeson was even more shocked and angry, and he couldn't help shouting while attacking. The Blessed One Candia and Crown of Thorns Mark also focused their eyes, and their attacks were directed at the Pope at the same time, making sure to stop the other party from further blasphemy. Many other bishops also took action, and various holy light binding spells were thrown directly at the Pope, ready to cooperate with the 3 bishops to capture him. However, Saint Messiah III remained motionless in the face of all these attacks. Only a trace of compassion flashed across his eyes. The next moment, when all the spells and attacks touched the young Pope's body, a sudden change occurred. All those who attacked the Pope were horrified to find that their attacks, which were originally as easy as a finger, suddenly froze, and then naturally disappeared into thin air, like a drop of water merging into the sea. At the same time, the sacred power in their bodies sent back a trembling and submissive feeling as if it had touched the root, and they could not even mobilize it again, as if they had just attacked not the Pope, but the God himself. This discovery directly caused many bishops to fall into a state of faith collapse, and many bishops' bodies were directly transformed into light spots and shattered, and they died completely. What did you do? The body was also uncontrollably transformed into light spots, and kept drifting away. Holy Judgment Jorgeson stared at the Pope blankly, not daring to believe his own perception. I have already told you that the one who blasphemed God is not me, but you. Looking at Jorgeson's body with compassion, the Pope sighed softly. In this First Holy Light Church, where endless power of faith converges, the huge pan-consciousness in the light crystal stone is transforming into a true God. However, because he has no self-will, with the help of his sub-body power, and the guidance of the eyes of hundreds of millions of believers, it is easy to focus this incredible power of faith on the Pope himself, that is, on him as a single individual. This is the final Holy Spirit ceremony, and it is also the ceremony for his formal deification. When the ceremony began, he was already on the path of God and had mastered the source of all divine power. Attacking him at this moment is equivalent to directly attacking the God of faith for the clergy who use divine power. Don't be afraid, my child. I do this so that people will have all in my presence. Turning his eyes back to the millions of believers watching the ceremony, the Pope's voice echoed, with a strange soothing power, which gradually calmed down the panic of the crowd. Anyone who believes in me in his heart will receive the highest glory. A faint and holy light shone from the Pope's body, like a layer of sacred clothes. You are one, and you are all. In the St. Mercia Empire, outside the countless large and small holy light churches, watching the holy appearance of the Pope, low prayers echoed from the crowd of believers at some point, and gradually gathered into an ocean. The ocean of faith power, which was larger and more pure and fanatical than before, descended again. The Evernight Icefield, the nameless snow peak, and the Destiny Stone Tower. In the snowy wind under the night, Anvis, in a pure white dress, sat alone on the cold snow-covered rocks, looking up at the seemingly low and dilapidated stone tower in front of him. An oversized pigeon squatted beside him, its red eyes staring at the stone tower in the same way. The cold mountain wind swept past, blowing the corners of Anvis's clothes. At this moment, all the archbishops gathered in the holy city. Although there were other clergy guarding this place, it was useless to Anvis. I originally thought that the High Elf Prophet meant for me to end the Unival Dream ceremony, return with the help of the original world rules, and hedge against the holy land of the Holy Kingdom of the Saint Messiah Empire. The new sacred rules, and the original rules of the world. Using the destructive rule ripples generated by the collision of two different rules, annihilate those extremely weak dark existences that have been sealed for countless thousands of years. Looking at the Destiny Stone Tower in front of him, Avis spoke in a low voice, his voice blending into the night wind, as if he was talking to pigeons, or as if he was talking to himself. But when I got here, sitting under the stone tower, I suddenly thought of something. As he said, he stood up and looked at the ancient stone tower in front of him, and the ever-changing green aurora above the stone tower. Look, does the shape of this stone tower look like a lighthouse? Chapter 895. Lighthouse? Looking away from the dark nice tower in front of him, Dove tilted his head and stared at Avis, waiting for his next words. Yes, lighthouse. Nodding gently, Avis spoke calmly. In fact, from the beginning to the end, I have always had a doubt. Is the world I live in real or illusory? From my point of view, I naturally hope that this world is real. But if so, how do we explain the existence of those strangers? The whistling snowflakes swept over the shoulders of Avis's white dress and also fell between the pigeon's feathers, but the snowflakes that fell on the latter just passed through as if they touched the air. Amid the flying snow, Avis stared quietly at the big pigeon that seemed to not exist in the world. You once said that you are the shadow of the superdimensional creature Conwoda. In this case, I wonder if you can please help me solve the mystery? The world is real, GH. The round red eyes looked at Avis's blue eyes, and the pigeon squatting on the rock flapped its wings and gave an answer. Strangers have their own origins, just as you have your own origins. The people in this world are different from you, and the people in another world are also different from you. You can sense my existence, just as you can sense the true existence of strangers. I seem to understand what is there in me that is worthy of the High Elf Prophet's special mention. Listening to the pigeon's somewhat obscure answer, Ava seemed to have suddenly figured out a solution to a problem that had been bothering him for a long time, and his voice gradually became louder. It's nothing else, not any external object I got after reincarnating into this world. I am a native, and I am also a stranger, but the most important thing is that I can also see the system panel on the stranger. Some kind of connection with the system is the thing in me that can really end the dark doomsday. If this world is real, then the system that sent countless strangers to this world must be some kind of incredibly powerful existence. Or even a projection of a higher dimensional creature? Only such an existence can completely destroy the sealed dark gods, and completely end this horrific war that has lasted from ancient times to the present, and the prophecy of the High Elf Prophet means that I can use this connection to borrow the other party's power in some way. Staring at the pigeon's reaction, Ava said his final guess. So, pigeon, could you please tell me how I can do all this? It's almost time, huh? Hearing Avis's guess, the pigeon did not continue to answer, but flew up and landed on his shoulder. Do what you want. I understand. Looking at the pigeon's reaction, Avis smiled. He had been confused before, but now, everything seemed to have been explained. Then, it's time to end it. Finally, after looking in the direction of the holy city of Gonzavalin, Avis turned around, and a dark silver ancient lantern appeared in his hand. The crystal-like flame emits a soft blue glow, which is not dazzling, but it is unstoppable. Pass no obstacles. Holding the Dead Sea lantern, Avis slowly walked into the low stone tower in front of him. This is his first time entering this famous Destiny Stone Tower. As he stepped into the door, he saw the narrow and low space inside the tower. The ancient black gneiss bricks were covered with dust. There was nothing at the bottom of the tower, only a narrow spiral staircase leading to the top, which did not look strange. Holding the blue lantern in his hand, Avis stepped onto the stairs silently. The soft light of the Dead Sea Lantern shone inside the stone tower, casting a swaying shadow. But as he moved forward, the stairs in front of him gradually changed strangely. The walls in front and on both sides gradually filled with a hazy fog of fate, which became thicker and thicker, obscuring all of Avis's perceptions and confusing his direction. If an ordinary professional enters this fog, no matter what means he uses, he can only walk out of the tower entrance again in confusion. But under the radiance of the Dead Sea Lantern in Avis's hand, these mists of fate could never cover Avis' eyes and change his direction. As Avis gradually moved upward, after an unknown period of time, the hazy mist gradually faded away, replaced by the endless dark starry sky on both sides of the road. The originally ordinary and simple stone steps under his feet now seemed like a road to heaven, winding and spreading to the depths of the endless and distant starry sky. And below the stone steps, a huge and astonishingly huge world appeared in Avis's eyes. But at this moment, the whole world is invaded by strange darkness and chaotic blocks of color. If you look closely, you will find that those blocks of color are composed of endless strange and twisted alien beings. In the center of these blocks of color, a huge dark green light shield is particularly eye-catching, and a dark green giant tree of amazing size stands in the center of the light shield. Under the huge tree canopy, there are hundreds of magnificent and gorgeous high elf cities. In the city, countless wizard towers are emitting dazzling magic light, launching various powerful attacks on the endless twisted existences in the outside world. Above the tree canopy, there was a dazzling ball of light suspended, as eye-catching as a star. The surrounding darkness and chaos constantly impacted the light shield and the ball of light, but the two always shone tenaciously, resisting the erosion of darkness. Avis was unmoved by such a strange phenomenon, but continued to move forward steadily. As Avis continued to move forward, the ball of light seemed to be rising, gradually leaving this world, and began to approach the direction of the stairs. As the distance continued to close, the details of the ball of light continued to appear. It can be seen that this seemingly tiny light spot is actually a floating city cluster formed by a large number of floating cities. Faced with the crisis of world destruction, the High Elves also split into two factions, one ready to rely on the World Tree to defend, and the other chose to leave the Unival world. The chaotic creatures besieging the light ball also showed details at this moment. They were a large number of dark mass-like soft-bodied creatures with hateful appearances, with star-shaped dark green tentacles on their surfaces. These strange beings kept trying to pounce on the defense of the floating city cluster, trying to break it and rush into it, completely annihilating every bit of unbearable light in it. But the floating cities still stood firm and kept rising, escaping from the encirclement of the dark beings. From a distance, this scene was like a towering tower holding up the stars from the earth, which was extremely shocking. As Avis continued to move forward, the floating cities shining with glory finally seemed to have reached a critical point. After a flash of strong light, they completely escaped from the encirclement of the endless hateful dark beings and flew into the depths of the starry sky. And behind the floating city, a glittering ribbon, like a long tail, continued to extend. Looking closely, the streamer is actually made up of countless tiny runes that look like stardust. Is this part of the scene of the ancient final battle? The last moment, when the floating cities of the High Elves leave this world? Looking at this scene, Avis walking on the stairs was slightly surprised. He could see that the various scenes around him were actually changing as he moved forward. He and the ancient stone steps under his feet were like a progress bar. When he stopped, everything would freeze, as if the video was paused. Chapter 896. As the floating cities rose into the starry sky, the seemingly endless stone steps ahead finally reached their end. A pure white door stood far away at the end of the stone steps, and everything behind the door was obscured by the wall of light. Is that the final place? The core hub of the Unival dream, behind that door? Looking at the white light door that looked like a small dot from afar, Avis moved forward steadily. As he moved forward, the surrounding scene continued to change. Behind the floating cities, the ribbon composed of endless runes began to spread out, forming huge rune rings, and then these rune rings began to spread out, covering the entire sky, as if preparing for a mysterious ritual of an incredibly large scale. However, although the floating cities have completely separated from Unival, the endless dark beings below do not want to let go of their prey. The towering tower composed of endless dark beings is still extending upwards, like a tentacle sticking out from the ground, rolling towards the floating cities, trying to trap them again. At the same time, in the suffocating silence of the dark sea, the outline of a huge monster shining with strange purple light emerged from the void and flew directly towards the floating cities. The strange force field expanded, firmly locking all space-folding spells. Purple Moon, Amos. Although the floating cities gathered in a spherical formation were as huge as mountains, they were like peanuts compared to basketballs when compared to the oncoming Purple Moon. Faced with this change, the floating cities began to change direction urgently, but it was obviously too late at this moment. With the current flying speed of the floating cities, a collision with the Purple Moon was almost inevitable. As the distance between the two got closer, they could even see the huge static moon sea on the spherical moon surface, the evil temple flashing with dim light, and those strange and twisted unknown buildings. There are indescribable beings living among these cold creatures, casting obscure gazes at the floating cities that are about to collide. Buzz. At the critical moment, the floating cities, which had no time to change direction, suddenly burst out a thick silver-white magic light column, which instantly bombarded the surface of Ziyue. Compared with the huge Ziyue, this attack was almost like a toothpick poking at a balloon, but Ziyue was slightly trembling by this amazing attack, and the collision posture suddenly paused, like a creature reacting to pain. However, even so, the collision was still inevitable. The half of the floating city near the outside barely adjusted its direction at the last moment, and passed by the Purple Moon before the collision, but the other part had no choice but to hit the moon. In a burst of strong glare, an extremely shocking explosion occurred, and the originally perfect spherical formation of the floating city group completely collapsed. The huge explosion ball expanded on the uneven surface of the Purple Moon, forming an extremely huge crater. The other half of the floating city that did not collide rushed out of the explosion and fire at the last moment, and continued to move towards the depths of the underworld. The Purple Moon that crashed into half of the floating city did not stop its movement trajectory, but suddenly fell towards Unival. Looking at the direction of its landing point, it was the direction of the world tree below. As the falling Purple Moon collided with the huge dark green light shield, a huge shock wave that was almost visible erupted instantly, and the dark creatures surrounding it were directly blown away like sand and gravel in the wind. The complete continental plate under the world tree collapsed like mud, and then it instantly broke into pieces under the irresistible force, revealing the dark red magma deep underground. Then, the surging sea water poured into the continental cracks from the endless sea, stirring up bursts of white smoke, and the crust moved violently, gradually pushing the distance between the many continental fragments. The huge dark green light shield emitted an extremely unstable flash, and the top that touched the Purple Moon was obviously sunken. This terrifying balance was deadlocked for a few breaths, and then it collapsed instantly under the terrified and desperate gaze of countless high elves in the light shield. But when he saw this, Avis suddenly realized that the Gate of Light, which was originally far away, had arrived in front of him without knowing when. So, this is the final fate of the high elves who stayed behind. The arrival of the Purple Moon triggered the Great Rip. Then what about the Purple Moon in the sky now? With new doubts, Avis continued to move forward until he stepped into the Gate of Light. The next moment, he suddenly felt a flash in front of his eyes, and the surrounding scene suddenly changed. Quiet, cold, and dead silent. He was in the middle of an extremely huge pit, and everything around him was glowing with lavender light. The dark starry sky, the soil and distant mountains shining with lavender light, and the huge lavender basin that was deeply sunken. Rather than a pit, it was a huge crater of astonishing size. A large number of broken metal debris were scattered everywhere inside the crater. Although they were already badly damaged, they still showed some of the style of the High Elf civilization. Is this the moon of Purple Moon Amos? Looking around, Avis could sense that the space here was in a strange superposition state. Strictly speaking, the place where he was now was both the Purple Moon in the main material world and the Purple Moon in the dream world. The Purple Moon Amos in the dream world was very special. Although there were countless independent dreams, the Purple Moons in all dream worlds were actually the same. The area where he was at the moment seemed to be the huge pit that was hit by the floating city of the High Elves in the previous plot animation. In the middle of the empty huge crater, a strange gray-white illusory sphere was suspended there, as if fixed in place by some invisible anchor bolt. Is this gray-white sphere the core of the Unival dream? Looking at the sphere suspended alone in the middle of the pit, Avis approached cautiously, and then tentatively extended his mental power to try to analyze its existence. But the moment Avis' mental power touched the sphere, he suddenly felt that his perspective seemed to be infinitely elevated, and an extremely broad but clear huge field of vision entered his perception. At this moment, Avis seemed to see everything in the Unival world. He saw the glittering, Holy Land-like territory of the Saint Messiah Empire, the huge faceless angel phantom of the City of Chant, the floating city of the Magic Council, and the huge world tree on the Elf continent on the other side of the endless sea. At this moment, in Avis's eyes, the huge faceless angel phantom was growing larger with the prayers of hundreds of millions of believers, and a certain aura on it was becoming stronger and stronger, making it impossible to ignore. At the same time, a message from the High Elf Prophet Hill appeared in Anvis' mind. This gray-white sphere is the core node of Unival's dream. Till point the rules of the world are an indivisible whole. The High Elf civilization has not really divided it, but only distorted it and overlapped it with the real world. Just like twisting a two-sided piece of paper and reconnecting it together, you can form a Mobius strip with only one side. The real world and the dream world are like the two sides of the paper. Till point is the rule connection point between the dream world and the real world, just like the position where the Mobius strip is twisted. To end the Unival dream ceremony and return this part of the rules to the real world, one only needs to slightly interfere with the till point, with the power of one's own rules, to destroy its original stability. In other words, as long as Avis destroys this gray-white sphere, the entire dream world will collapse with the withdrawal of the world rules, and the dark existences that were once sealed will also be completely unsealed. So should it be destroyed now? Looking at the shadow of the faceless angel in the territory of the Saint Messia Empire, Avis suddenly stopped. Not now. Chapter 897. Saint Messiah III's plan has not yet been completed. Neither the Holy Land nor the gods have been able to completely break through and reach the realm of true legend. Only when the Pope's plan is completely completed can the power of the rule collision be maximized. Amid the tense waiting of all parties, the Pope's ascension ceremony in the Holy Messiah Empire has finally reached the final moment. Let there be light. As the Pope's last voice fell, the huge faceless angel phantom, whose aura had reached the peak of this world, suddenly began to grow rapidly at this moment, and even began to merge with the entire Holy Land Saint Messiah Empire. At the same time, some shackles that bound it suddenly broke, and a strange crystal light that seemed to not exist in the world, but was real quietly condensed out. Godhead. This thing was the first time it appeared in Unival since the end of the ancient war. At this moment, the size of the angel shadow had grown to a limit. It slightly opened its arms, as if embracing the entire Saint Messia Empire. Moreover, the angel shadow's originally blurred face suddenly became clear at this moment. That was the appearance of Saint Messiah III. At this moment, Avis finally gathered the power of rules and pinched the gray-white sphere. Crack, as Avis's attack hit, the gray-white perfect sphere made a crisp sound, and then collapsed like sand. In an instant, the most core fulcrum was lost, and a violent chain reaction began to appear in the dream world. As the world rules that were the basis of the dream were extracted, the stars in the sky that were originally as dark as holes in the sky suddenly lit up one by one and turned into the appearance of stars in the normal world. In the northern sky, the guiding star that originally shone with a faint blue light quickly dimmed and turned into a huge black hole. Then, the sky in the dream world, which was originally in the night, suddenly lit up. The dazzling sun rose on the horizon, and the dark hole formed by the guiding star hung beside the sun, like another black sun. The next moment, with the two suns as the center, starting from the surface dream, the entire dream world began to disintegrate at an alarming speed. At the same time, with the complete collapse of the dream world, a large amount of indescribable horror aura emerged from the depths of the dark black hole transformed by the guiding star. They were the ancient dark beings sealed by the Unival Dream ritual. They were completely sealed by the High Elves in the ancient End War. They wandered and lost in the empty dark cracks for millions of years. At this moment, they were extremely hungry. However, this was far from enough to make them die. As rule creatures, they themselves were concrete creatures that relied on some kind of alien rule to exist. Simple consumption could only make them weak, but it could not shake the foundation of their existence. Now, as the sealed dream world completely collapsed, smelling the sweet breath of countless intelligent life thoughts from the main material world, these extremely hungry dark beings can no longer bear it, and are ready to rush into the real world to enjoy the feast. In the main material world, the return of the world rules also caused drastic changes. The first to bear the brunt was the Saint Messia Empire, which had been completely Holy Land. As Anvis imagined, with the return of the original world rules, the new rules of the Holy Land and the former collided violently in an instant. The collision between the two rules is extremely cruel. There is no possibility of compatibility between the two sides. The only result is that one of them will be crushed and destroyed. In an instant, the core of this collision, the Saint Messia Empire, which was transformed into the kingdom of God on earth by the power of faith, was covered with cracks in the huge phantom of the illusory angel, like a crystal shattered by a giant hammer. The new sacred rules born from the vast power of faith are ultimately a bit weak. Originally, this kind of product similar to the kingdom of God should not exist in the world, but should exist independently relying on the main material world. However, due to the lack of rules in the Unival world, the new rules directly replaced the missing parts of the original rules, and filled them into the main material world. Now, with the return of the original world rules, the new rules have no escape and are directly crushed and collapsed. The process of the Saint Messiah Empire sanctification also came to an abrupt halt, and the originally stable power of faith began to fluctuate. The people were horrified to find that the sacred power they relied on was gradually dissipating, as if it was wiped out from the world by an invisible giant hand. At the same time, the top leaders of the Holy Light Church also fell into unprecedented chaos. No! As the core of the Ascension plan, Saint Messiah III was the first to bear the brunt. He had just successfully ascended to the legendary realm with the help of the integration of the three major rituals, and at this moment he only had time to roar. The new kingdom of God, and he were a trinity. Due to the deep connection, the destruction of the kingdom of God's rules caused him a devastating blow. At the same time as the angel's phantom was shattered, the terrifying aftermath of the shattering of the rules directly swept across the entire Unival world. For those below the 9th level, who have not yet come into contact with the power of rules, the ripples caused by the collision of rules are like a breeze blowing on the face, and will not have any impact. But for beings above the 9th level, the power of this collision is no different from ordinary humans facing the shock wave of an explosion. The existence that has just entered the 9th level has not felt so deeply, just a tingling pain from the depths of the soul, and part of the regularized body is impacted and becomes a little frivolous. But those veteran 9th level and 9th level extreme strongmen are different. The deeper the degree of regularization of their bodies, the greater the power of the rule impact they bear. However, as the aftermath of the collision disappeared, the injured 9th order extreme being suddenly realized something was wrong. What is this? Feeling? The legendary barrier disappeared? After sensing the power of their own rules, the faces of the 9th order extreme masters suddenly changed, with a mixture of surprise and ecstasy in their eyes. The legendary barrier they faced in the past, the seemingly insurmountable boundary, seemed to be broken in this sudden rule impact. This sudden change caused their long-standing power realm to begin to grow uncontrollably, as if a new power awakened in their bodies, guiding them to move towards a higher realm. At the same time, the extremely weak ancient extraterritorial beings, who had just returned to the main material world, were also hit by this rule wave. For these rule creatures that rely on the rules themselves, the lethality of this rule wave is almost equal to the scorching sun to Bai Shui. If they were still in their prime, they could still resist this wave of damage, but they were already extremely weak in the Endless Seal, and now they were hit with the final fatal blow. However, despite the amazing lethality, not all dark beings will be destroyed by this impact. There are also differences in strength among the extraterritorial beings. The weaker beings were completely wiped out, but the most powerful and ancient dark beings did not perish. When those terrifying beings were at their strongest, even if they did nothing, their existence alone could destroy the current human civilization. Even if they have been sealed for countless years, and are extremely weak, they are still not killed by a simple rule ripple. Although they suffered heavy damage again in the aftermath of the rule collision, they still survived. Chapter 898. At this moment, Avis was unaware of all these changes. When he destroyed the gray-white sphere, he only felt a sudden blur in front of his eyes, and then the whole world went dark. Where is this? Avis tried to fly forward, but there was nothing but darkness all around him. No matter which direction he moved, his position seemed to remain unchanged. Is it some kind of trap, or an illusion? Finally you did it. Just when Avis was about to try to break through this space, a voice that overlapped, as if countless voices were superimposed together, but was extremely magnificent, sounded from the dark nothingness. Who? Avis turned his head suddenly after a moment's pause, looking in the direction of the sound. At some point, a silver octahedral crystal cone appeared there, and its shape made Avis feel somewhat familiar. My name is Vakrit. The magnificent voice sounded again, echoing in this strange dark space. Or if you want, you can call it another name you use more often, System. Hearing the content of this voice, Avis's mind was shaken as if a thunderbolt had struck. Even though he now possessed the strength of the 9th level, Avis still couldn't understand how the game system could safely send millions, or even tens of millions of fragile players' consciousnesses to this world across countless time and space, and create bodies for them. Avis even suspected that even a true legendary powerhouse might not be able to do this kind of miraculous method. And now, the system appeared in front of him in the form of a silver 8-sided crystal cone, and was even communicating with him. He also recalled the silver octahedral crystal cone. It was the symbol of the task guide on the game panel, but the color was different. Vakrit. System? The voice trembled unconsciously. Avis stared at the crystal cone and asked the question that he had been puzzled about for a long time. So, what is the game Mysterious Era? Is this world really virtual? According to your understanding, if you regard the world you call Blue Star as real, then this world Unival is also real. The overlapping voices sounded again, and the 8-sided crystal cone emitted a faint silver light, as if explaining time and truth. As you can see, I created the Mysterious Era to allow the human consciousness living on the surface of the blue planet to come to this world and accelerate the development of this world. Why? After listening to the crystal cone's reply, Avis's doubts were not resolved. Why do you do this? I need to awaken my kind. The crystal cone answered without any emotion. Unival, it's here, and it's in a deep sleep. I want to wake it up. Wake up your kind? Avis was a little surprised. There are people of the same kind as the system in this world, and they're in a deep sleep? Unival, my kind. The people in this world live on its surface. It fell into a deep sleep countless thousands of years ago. At this point, the voice of the crystal cone fluctuated slightly. I received its message during a dimensional jump. It hopes that I can wake it up. However, the distance between me and its body is too far, so far that the power I can interfere with it is negligible. The distance between us is not only space, but also time. It exists in the time and space countless thousands of years later, when there is no intelligent life in this world. In the countless thousands of years that followed, I tried many ways. For example, sending out coordinates to attract the creatures of the Nether Sea to come. The world tree Bajaman was also attracted during this period, and took root on the surface of this Unival. However, after millions of years, Unival still showed no signs of awakening. So, I led away all the beings in the underworld except the world tree again, so that Unival could reestablish a normal surface ecology. During this period, with my help, Unival imitated the lives living on its surface, and created the original High Elves in a dream, but it still failed to wake up. Finally, I found the purple moon Amos drifting in the underworld. If its power collides with the world tree, it may help me wake up Unival. I sent out the coordinates again, to guide it to this world, but unfortunately, even if it finally collided with the body of the world tree, the stimulation was still not enough to awaken Unival, and it only created a disordered area on its surface. Cooperating with Conwoda to project the human consciousness on the blue star was just a new attempt when I was looking for a way to awaken Unival. So, have you found a way now? Is it related to Unival's dream? Listening to the crystal cone casually revealing the biggest secret in Unival's history, Avis suddenly felt a little chilly, an indescribable strange feeling, which made him instinctively ask a question. At the same time, he suddenly thought of the reason why he came here. Is there any connection between them? The spell you call Unival's dream only borrows part of the power of Unival's dream while sleeping. However, this is indeed related to my method. The silver crystal cone swayed slightly, emitting light silver ripples, and seemed to be a little happy. If two different external rules collide on its surface, and the impact is still not enough to wake it up, then it can only rely on its own rule power. If a new rule can be inserted into its original rule power, and then this part of the rule conflicts with its original rule, it can produce the strongest stimulation from the root. The Unival Dream ritual extracted part of the rules, creating a rule gap, and the new rules created by humans filled this part. And now, you have successfully ended the Unival Dream ceremony, causing two different rules to collide. The sound of the overlapping silver crystal cone still echoed around, but at this moment, Ava's heart seemed to have a thunderous explosion, and almost no subsequent sound could be heard. So, all this was arranged by you? Trembling all over, Ava stared at the shining crystal cone, took a deep breath, and his voice was rarely mixed with strong anger. My time travel, the wish made by Avis in this world, everything, was predestined from the beginning to the end? At this moment, Avis thought of a lot of things, and everything that happened since the time travel passed to his heart like a revolving lantern. The changes of the empire, the development of the times, the creation of gods by the church. If all this is predestined, then, what is he? Predestined? Faced with Avis's question, Crystal Cone answered calmly. Let me show you. As the sound of the crystal cone fell, Avis suddenly felt a flash in front of his eyes. The darkness faded, and the endless flow of light suddenly passed by his eyes. The colorful colors that could not be described in any language, and could not even be distinguished by the naked eye filled his vision. This scene instantly reminded him of the scene he saw when he just crossed over. It seemed that he also experienced this scene, and then crossed over to become Avis in this life. But this time, under the blessing of Akrit's power, Avis saw the true face of those colorful lights. It was the scene that happened, is happening, and will happen in countless different timelines of Unival. Chapter 899. In just a short moment, Avis had seen what happened in thousands of world lines. Some worlds are now completely occupied by dark beings, and chaos and despair shroud the entire world. Some worlds still maintain the situation of the ancient times of hundreds of races, with dragons, titans, and high elves ruling the continent, and powerful legendary creatures such as phoenixes and feathered serpents living on one side, revered as gods by weak intelligent races. Some worlds are in the era of human civilization, some worlds have players, and some worlds do not have players, and this difference also determines the development process of the world. The world with players develops relatively faster, and will be influenced by the civilization of another world. However, if you look to the far end of time, you will find that all worlds are swallowed by darkness without exception. Based on your experience, you should know that from a high-dimensional perspective, the timeline is not unique, but there are countless parallel worlds. In Avis's consciousness, Vakreet's voice seemed to sound from an extremely far-away place. I have traveled through billions of timelines, but the ending remains unchanged. Until this timeline you appeared. Under your influence, human civilization successfully created new rules, and filled the gaps in the rules of Unival created by the High Elves. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. Just like in other timelines, although there is a theory, there is no complete individual that can carry such rules and preserve consciousness. You mean Yanel? Hearing what Vakreet said, Avis suddenly remembered Bishop Yanel. As the core of the holy body, one of the three major ceremonies of the Pope's ascension to the gods, Yanel's existence is indispensable. In another timeline that he has not yet crossed, the Pope did not finally hold the ascension ceremony. The reason is that Yanel in that time and space was still not enough to carry the truly complete rules even in the end. Without Ambus's twisted seed as a consciousness positioning, Yanel, like several other young bishops as seeds, gradually lost his self-will in the transformation ceremony of the Saint Plan and finally became one with God. Yes! The crystal cone flashed, and the silver light fluctuated slightly. If that individual had not been born because of your influence, if you had not broken the seal at that moment and restored the original world rules, then, the timeline you are in is just another world engulfed by darkness among countless parallel worlds. You saved yourself and the world. And I just saw you in countless timelines that returned to darkness, that's all. As the incredible power that Vakreet used to maintain Avis's state faded, Avis's perspective also left the high-dimensional perspective and returned to the dark space before. After listening to Vakreet's words, Avis fell into silence. Many questions that he had been puzzled about were finally answered at this moment. So, has Unival been awakened? Yes. When Avis asked this question, another pleasant voice, like a clear spring, suddenly sounded. At the same time, the darkness around the space receded like melting ice and snow. Avis came back to his senses, and found that he had stood on the top of the Tower of Destiny without knowing when. Avis looked at the source of the new sound, and then found that it was an illusory light ball that seemed to be a scaled-down version of the Unival world. The light ball floated quietly in the air on one side of the tower top, emitting a faint halo, illuminating the white snow on the top of the tower. Are you Unival? Yes, I am Unival, a world creature. The light ball swayed up and down, as if nodding. In the dream, I saw you and everything you did. What about those sealed ancient beings? How are they? Looking around, Avis suddenly remembered what happened before. Once the seal of the Univar dream disappears, those terrifying ancient dark beings will come directly. I expelled them. This world does not need their existence. When they know my existence, they will never come back. Unival's words were understated, but the content was extremely shocking. Now you should break through. As Unival's voice fell, Avis had already sensed that the world was different from before. As the top existence in this world, he could clearly sense the changes in the rules. The road that was originally missing in front of him was back. At this moment, under the effect of the legendary source essence that he had absorbed in his spirit, Avis's control over the power of rules began to improve at a terrifying rate. It seemed like a long time had passed, and it seemed like just a moment. When a certain critical point was crossed, everything was different from before. The barrier of the legendary realm disappeared quietly. At the same time, the web of destiny of the continent began to boil, as if celebrating the birth of the first legendary existence in human history. Avis looked around, and the world around him appeared in his perception in a brand new regular form. The world was still the same world, ice and snow, rocks, ancient masonry walls. Objects of various materials made up a complete world, but in Avis's regular perspective, they seemed to be composed of countless identical particles in different forms. Avis tried to reach out and touch the pile of particles in front of him. As his mind moved, the next moment, the snow in front of him instantly turned into a gold coin. In this process, there was no magic fluctuation, as if it was just a natural change of form like ice and snow melting into water. Now, you have the ability to cross the Nether Sea by yourself. Unival's voice sounded from the side at the right time. Next, this world can no longer provide you with help. If you want to go further, you need to enter the Nether Sea to find the Nether Sea source and establish a constant connection with the Sea of Void origin. I understand. Pick up the gold coin, and Avis nodded. Then, I'm going to find Vicrete. Looking forward to meeting you next time. After leaving the last voice, the light ball dissipated in the air. Go to the underworld. Looking up at the real starry sky that was completely different from before after the collapse of the dream of Unival, Avis suddenly relaxed and laid back, letting his body sink into the soft snow on the top of the tower. The cold snowflakes fell on his face, like soft feathers, gently brushing his skin, bringing a trace of imperceptible chill, but also awakening the long-lost tranquility in his heart. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The air was filled with a clear and pure breath, which was the unique fresh smell of the top of this cold snowy mountain, as if it could wash away all the dust and fatigue. I will. Chapter 900. Glorious Calendar Year 2470, Blazing Sun Month, 15th Day. Avis visits the Continental Magic Council. The floating city of Oricien, the headquarters of the Continental Magic Council, the Little Kingdom Federation, sank unprecedentedly. Led by the three chairmen, a group of powerful 9th and 8th level spellcasters came out and unanimously paid the highest courtesy to the visiting Avis. Thank you, Your Majesty, for everything you have done for this world and for us. The Stargazer spoke seriously, expressing his gratitude to Avis on behalf of all members of the Continental Magic Council. Avis saved the world, so that they didn't have to abandon everything and leave their homes to live a life of wandering in the underworld. The awakening of Univals will also give the world a guarantee, and the underworld beings could no longer wreak havoc on the world as recklessly as before. Moreover, with the return of the world's rules, the legendary barriers disappeared, and they finally had a direction to move forward. All this alone was worth it for all of them to worship Avis as a god. At present, the situation on the continent is completely different from a month ago. Due to Saint Messiah III's previous plan to ascend to the gods, the Holy Light Church suffered the most serious losses. The Pope himself died directly, and the original gods also collapsed and dissipated with the Pope's death. The former 7 bishops lost 3 directly, and the other high-level clergy were nearly half injured or killed. But the most serious thing is that with the dissipation of the gods, many clergy were shocked to find that their holy power and divine arts, which were originally operating at their fingertips, were delayed or even dissipated. They prayed to the gods in fear, but even though their faith was still pious, the gods never responded to them again. Under this heavy blow, the Saint Messiah Empire was once in chaos, and many originally devout clergy chose to commit suicide because they could not accept the facts. At the critical moment, Yanel, who was once regarded as the 8th Archbishop of the Holy Light Church, and the 9th level extreme strongman Holy Sun stood up and took over the responsibility of leading the Holy Light Church in times of crisis, and served as Saint Messiah IV. At the last moment of the collapse of the Ascension ceremony, Saint Messiah III used the last bit of his strength to cut off Yanel's connection with the entire ceremony, avoiding the result that he and the ceremony were wiped out by the ripples of the rules. With the assistance of the remaining 4 bishops, and the remaining high-level officials of the Holy See, Yanel quickly pacified the chaos in the Saint Messiah Empire. At this time, Yanel, wearing a gorgeous white and gold papal crown, holding a scepter and wearing a sacred triple crown, stood in the historic white stone square in front of the First Holy Light Church of Gonsavalin, and gave his first public speech after being promoted to Pope, and used magic to broadcast it to all residents of the Empire. As for the previous problem with the divine power, Yanel gave an explanation. In order to save the world from the dark doomsday, the gods consumed a lot of power and had entered a temporary sleep, just like thousands of years ago. However, although the gods have fallen into sleep, the holy light will still respond to the world. As long as there is still light in the heart, the darkness will never have a place to stand. Therefore, the Holy Light Church will set the first day of the middle month of each year in the future, which is the first day of the Divine Grace Festival, as the second Divine Rest Day to thank the gods for driving away the darkness again and saving the world. The 15th day of the Blazing Sun month every year, which is today, will be set as the New Life Festival. In the following 7 days, the entire empire will hold a grand celebration to celebrate that people have completely escaped the clutches of darkness and regained their new life. After receiving such an explanation, many people in the Saint Messiah Empire calmed down and began to be grateful to the gods, who saved everyone. The most important thing is that the divine power in Yanel did not show sluggishness and difficulty in control like most other clergymen. Every time he appeared before the world, he showed an incomparably glorious and sacred posture. This also made other clergy gradually calm down and began to follow Yanel's instructions to rebuild their faith in the holy light in their hearts. After the grand ceremony ended, the people gradually dispersed. After Yanel dealt with the bishops, who expressed greetings and praises to him, he took off the Pope's scepter and crown, and came alone to the back of the church, which was a forbidden place of the Holy See, and looked at the figure in a white cloak who appeared at some unknown time. "You're here." In front of the secret door, Avis took off the white hood of his cloak and nodded to Yanel. "Come with me." As they spoke, the two stepped into the corridor and opened the underground cave with the authority of Yanel as the Pope. At this moment, in the huge light crystal hill, the original sacred and powerful Pambal body had completely collapsed, and the entire light crystal dimmed. However, in the center of the core of the light crystal, a new light point, symbolizing hope, had quietly lit up without knowing when. God? Looking at the flickering light, Avis was silent for a long time. When the world rules are restored to their integrity, perhaps in the distant future, he can really ascend to the throne of God with the help of endless power of faith. He was born in people's faith, and also symbolizes the bright side of people's hearts. Staring at the huge light crystal in front of him, Yanel smiled. As long as the glory in the hearts of the world is still there, I believe there will be such a day. Next, I will go to the underworld sea to find further opportunities, and the affairs of the Yar continent will be left to you. Nodding, Avis's figure disappeared again. Don't worry. Looking at the direction where Avis left, Yanel nodded slightly. When the other party reached the legendary realm, he had already expected this day, but he didn't expect it to come so soon. Gloria Empire. With Avis' promotion to legend, the war within the Empire finally subsided completely. It was meaningless to continue the civil war. No one could stop the will of a true legend of the world. After Anbis wiped out several marquises, who had targeted the Olivendi family in a month, several princes and princesses and royal guardians unanimously invited Anbis to meet and took the initiative to ask Anbis to decide the next ownership of the Empire. However, since he was ready to go to the underworld, Anbis had no interest in ruling the Gloria Empire. Originally, Anbis was going to get a huge territory for Fiona, just like in another world line, but the girl rejected his proposal. So, Anbis casually appointed the 9th Prince Lano, who had a good relationship with him, as the new Gloria 4 to govern the Empire on his behalf, and then left with everyone's farewell. The players are still the same as before. Anbis's meeting with the system, and the awakening of Unival have little impact on them. As the world rules are restored to their integrity, the players ushered in a new version update, which lifted the level cap of 96. Are you ready to go to the underworld? In the study room of the Lord's mansion in Carla City, the blonde half-elf girl Claire stood in front of the window, looking at the returning Avis, with a hint of expectation in her eyes as clear as the eyes see. She originally came from the underworld sea, and after reuniting all the fragments, she did not have too much nostalgia for this world. It has been arranged. After we leave, the position of Duke of Carlos will be handed over to Fiona. In this world, I will set up time and space coordinates and return once a year for repairs. Walking to the side of the half-elf girl bathing in the sun, Avis looked out the window at the prosperous scenery of the city of Carlos and nodded slightly. What a beautiful world, it will definitely have a better future. So let's go! Looking at Avis in front of her with a smile, Claire's charming big eyes fluttered, and her voice was as ethereal as a stream in the forest. Brother, wait a minute. Suddenly, an uninvited guest broke in. The two turned their heads, and saw that the visitor was Fiona, who had arrived at some unknown time. Take me with you. The girl ran over and gently held Avis's hand. Brother, I've thought about it. I don't want to be separated from you. Okay then. Looking at the little girl, who didn't want to let go, Avis smiled warmly, and gently embraced her. Let's go together.